You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
He's a U.S. Ranger. Highly decorated. Did a little hell raising when he was a kid, nothing serious. He's defending his wife. Got in a drunken brawl. And he killed the guy. Could have happened to you or me.
I've been chasing this guy ever since I joined the force. He has no conscience, and he shows no remorse. He's the mastermind behind numerous bombings and political assassinations. He has a felony list a mile long: murder, arson, kidnapping, terrorism, you name it. He's the most dangerous and brilliant criminal mind I've ever known. For years, I've been watching him, tracking him, studying his every move. I know his every mannerism, facial tic, gesture. I know him better than he knows himself. And now, after all this time, I finally figured out a way to trap him. I will become him.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoids, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are keeping this masterpiece train rolling, but I'm going to keep them a surprise for now. Let Josh handle that. But join the sleaze, please.
Hell yeah. We decide on all the official ratings and rankings for every film that we cover. Patreon subscribers also get an honor shout out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for coming up on 6 years of bonus episodes. There's like 140 plus bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, which we have almost done 50 of, where we talk about new release genre films that come out throughout the year. And there is definitely some ones on the way that you're going to want to be interested in. There's a new Mission Impossible movie that's just come out. There is a Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan. So look forward to that. If that interests you at all, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast. And speaking of which, we did have quite a few people make the jump this week. We're going to give them their shout outs here. We had AE sign up at $5 a month. Daniel McLean sign up. We had Zachary Hollingsworth and Cohen Simpson 711 both sign up for an entire year of the show at a little bit of a reduced monthly rate pledging for at the annual tier. We also had Julian Kopkis sign up. We had Michael, as well as another Michael Johnson. We had Philip Amon. We had Jesse sign up. We had Matt Simon sign up, Jonah Banyaski, Alex Draws, and Philip Holler. So thanks so much to all of you folks. Hope you are enjoying those bonus episodes. We appreciate the support.
Yeah, thank you.
That's the one plug for the week. The other, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you are listening to the show on either one of those platforms, and I can see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both of those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the very last plug for the week, as always, is merch. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you can think of. And you guys have thought of a lot of things. We've had people buy notebooks, pens, hoodies, pillows. You can find that link in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, is my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I think 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over here on the main feed would have heard from us, and we would have had special returning guest, young adult horror author Emma Berquist on the podcast, making her second appearance to talk about some late 90s post-Scream teen horror slasher boom that kind of happened around that time. We talked about the Scream screenwriter Kevin Williamson's very hastily greenlit I Know What You Did Last Summer from 1997. They were like, Kevin, do you have anything that's even slightly like Scream that we can just put on the screens in like 6 months? And he was like, I do. Now get me.
He just brought it from the depths of his desk and he had something for him.
He's like, get me. Now we're gonna get some Buffy and some Dawson's Creek people in there and we call it a day. And we paired that film with a film from 1998 called Urban Legend, which is straight up as close of a Scream clone as you could possibly get, but just instead of Ghostface, you have a parka-wearing University of Toronto killer staging and modeling his kills after urban legends, modern folklore, and definitely has some pretty wacky kills in that one.
Yeah, some surprisingly mean-spirited kills, which is great. And I'm glad I got to rewatch it because the first time, for some reason, it really did not work for me at all. But I liked it much more this time around. So always like another chance.
And any movie where Brad Dourif is just screaming at the top of his lungs in the first like 5 minutes of a movie, it's worth watching.
It's worth checking out for sure.
Yeah, and so if you haven't heard that episode, that was over on the main feed 2 weeks ago. Go back, go check it out. But then last week, over on the Patreon exclusively, we talked about your patron voted episode, because once every 2 months we allow our patrons to vote and select the double feature that we are going to be talking about. And as always, you guys picked a banger. You picked a crazy one for us, one that obviously has to go super long. And we talked about two very incredibly surreal and beautiful biographical dramas about mid-20th century self-destructive queer authors whose real lives became one with their art, which sounds really hyper-specific, but there are two movies: Mishima, A Life in 4 Chapters from 1985, directed by Paul Schrader, as well as Naked Lunch from 1991, directed by David Cronenberg. The first one, obviously, about the Japanese author Yukio Mishima. The second one, American author William S. Burroughs, and both handled in a very, very surreal, subjective, half autobiography, half adaptation of their work to kind of put you into their mindset, and both stylistically just, insane.
Yeah, and it's the way that I wish, and I know you do wish too, that most biopics were probably done nowadays in some way, shape, or form. Especially once the types of films that once you know a little bit of context about who they're about, the films just open right up to you, and I think explore the people much deeper than a lot of these kind of more generic approaches would do. So, yeah, they're great.
Hell yeah. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was over on the Patreon last week. So go back and go check that one out. It was a lot of fun breaking those two films down. We went a little crazy with it, especially because there's so much research to have to be done to talk about the authors and the connection to the filmmakers and everything. Yeah. We went a little crazy. But moving on to this week, we have a very special returning guest making his third appearance on the show this week. He is a writer for Rolling Stone, Vice, Stereo Gum, GQ, Pitchfork, Vanity Fair, and I'm sure a few others that I couldn't list because he is too prolific. He is as we've mentioned a couple times, he's a fellow film bro, and we have talked Rudy Ray Moore with him, Spike Lee with him, and we've also talked significantly about the death penalty on the last time we had him on, where we were talking 12 Angry Men and Oxbow incident. But that guest is Jayson Buford. Jayson, how you doing?
Hello. What's up? I'm doing great. It's great to be on Sleazoids again. I still think about the Oxbow incident all the fucking time.
It's so bleak. So bleak. And I went into a bookstore.
So fucked up.
Yeah, I went into a bookstore the other day and actually found like a 1950s copy of the book, and I haven't read it yet, but I picked it up instantly because I was just reminded of us doing that episode. We were all like had our souls sucked out of us by the end of that conversation.
Oh my God, yeah. That was a depressing episode, but always fun. Always fun to have you on.
Yeah. Well, and I think you did take us in a little bit of a different direction. I feel like last time we maybe got a little too heavy, a little too existential. And when I was asking you, I was like, Jayson, obviously we're going to have you on again. What would you want to do? And Jayson, what did you come back to me with?
Yeah, remind me, I had just seen a Nick Cage movie. I think it was Face Off. Yeah. And I had said, like, look, this is not my first time, this is my second time, but this shit is fucking incredible. Like, yo,
hell yeah.
like, yo, we actually need to talk about this. And I remember you were like, yeah, definitely, let's do it. And we were going back and forth on what we wanted to do. But eventually, I think it had to be Con Air as well. They both came out in the same year. I think they're both Cage at his peak of his movie star powers. He just gets off winning the Academy Award, so he starts to kind of do less Oscar-baity movies and much more of a kind of film bro-y, like just like electric kind of films, and eclectic also as well. Like this is, I mean, John Woo's first Hollywood movie, essentially, or first movie where he had complete Hollywood control. Right. And it's Face Off is fantastic. And Con Air, I think, is one of the more interesting studies of what character acting can be.
Absolutely. What a stacked bench of guys in that film, and an interesting relationship to Cage too, because Cage, it was his breakout into, I am going to do like pop commercial films, you know, because you're right, he had just won for, I think, Zandali a couple years earlier, and he obviously did like, you know, Red Rock West, and I think Leaving Las Vegas like right before this as well in '95.
I actually think he won for Leaving Las Vegas.
Oh, did he win for Leaving Las Vegas? Wow. Okay. Yeah. I might have got those mixed up. Zandali is the much weirder one. But yes, I think he did win. I think you're right for Leaving Las Vegas. I feel like I remember actually watching that acceptance speech with Patricia Arquette was there, because they eventually did bringing out the Dead together as well.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think he took away from that Oscar. He was like, I'm gonna make fucking Jerry Bruckheimer films. He did The Rock, then followed The Rock straight into Con Air. And as Jason mentioned, yes, these are these both 1997. I want to clarify too, though, June 1997.
Right.
So like this is actually going to be, I think, one of the rare times on the podcast we are talking about a possible pairing that people actually watched theatrically when they came out. Someone in late June 1997 hadn't seen Con Air, which came out early in the month, and waited until Face Off came out and went and double featured these two films and had their minds absolutely melted by the maximalist summer action nonsense of these two films.
They came out as a changed person, absolutely.
I mean,
after seeing
this might be the best. This might be the best year for an actor like ever.
It's crazy to think that those came out like literally back to back. He shot them back to back, and both have like high concept screenplays that are so ridiculous they basically feel like they were written as parodies of like the late 80s or early 90s action style with the use of the style and the narrative tropes and everything, but they're just directed with such a level of commitment to the bit that they are just like real deal glorious spectacle. So yeah, we're going to talk Jerry Bruckheimer and Simon West doing knockoff Michael Bay Tony Scott on an airplane prison break movie, which is just a psycho premise in and of itself.
It's great. But it's great. I actually don't think people I shouldn't say people, me. I actually don't think I realized just how self-aware the movie is. It's literally called Con Air, like comics on an airplane.
Yeah, it's so unreal. Like that is like classic studio executive brain mindset, where he walks in, he goes up to the whiteboard, and he's like, Con Air, and people just start like hooting and hollering when they start figuring it out.
It's the same thing with Face Off.
It's the same like deal. They even have two words beautiful. In the title because of course, John Woo's glorious masterpiece of destructive ballet and the most mega acting that has like ever been put on screen, and just personally one of Jamie and I's favorite films, one of the films we watched together before we started the podcast, and just went had our faces absolutely melted by it, and we knew one day this was going to be a big episode and we were eventually going to get to it.
Yeah, happy to be here. That day has come.
Electric. I'm really happy to be here. Let's do this, guys.
Let's do it. All right. So that being said, I think we're going to jump right into it here. Let's start things off with Con Air.
Jerry Bruckheimer, the producer of The Rock. Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, John Malkovich.
Where are they going to land this thing? How do you feel about the blackjack tables?
On June 6th. Con Air. Directed by Simon West.
Thank you, and have a pleasant flight.
All right, we are talking Con Air, the 1997 American action thriller film directed by Simon West, produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, and starring an all-timer cast including Nick Cage, John Malkovich, John Cusack, Ving Rhames, Dave Chappelle, Steve Buscemi, Danny Trejo, and many, many others. We can't even get that too deep into it here, because we will just as we break down some of the scenes. But this is kind of the Nick Cage show double feature, and we've talked about Nick Cage obviously on quite a few episodes on the show. With Hessa, we talked about Vampire's Kiss just a couple weeks ago. With Wyatt, we talked Raising Arizona, and I think we've also talked Joel Schumacher's 8mm, Brian De Palma's Snake Eyes. So he's obviously just one of our favorite actors simply because of how diverse his career is and how ambitious his physical performances are. We've talked many times about his love of, silent era expressionism and, his willingness to go big and expressive with his face or his body and make, moves that would embarrass another actor, but he's not afraid to. And it makes him really special. And which is why I'm glad that, we've already talked about manic weirdo Cage. We've talked about Looney Tune Cage and like corrupt slimeball Cage. It is finally time to talk about Nicolas Cage, action star, which other than, The Rock was kind of seen as sort of the transition period to that, because Jerry Bruckheimer was like the guy at the time. We've also talked about him on our, I think when we did Top Gun episode and Days of Thunder episode that we did. He is the defining like coked out 80s pop, star vehicle, music video, advertisement, action film producer who basically kickstarted the careers of Tony Scott and Michael Bay, did things like, not just The Rock and Top Gun, but like Crimson Tide, Bad Boys, Beverly Hills Cop, Armageddon. And his formula and style probably immediately was just conjured into your mind just listing some of those titles, like the huge slow-mo, the pop rock, the blaring saturated, oranges, the crazy camera maneuvering and, just all of the stuff that he was, sort of pioneering in terms of what was crass and commercial in the 1980s and 1990s with Michael Bay and with Tony Scott. And
you say what you will about the man, but he absolutely knew who to hire. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, well, and these movies, honestly, well, especially I'll say Con Air does, because it sounds like it basically was that Bruckheimer was at the point where he was ready to basically parody his own formula and style and blow it up to certain cartoon levels, because he came up with this concept. It sounds like himself. He was like a Prison Break movie, but it's on a plane. It's called Con Air. And apparently his producing partner, longtime partner, Don Simpson, did not like this concept at all. He was like, this is fucking stupid. I don't want anything to do with this. And this movie is partially why the two might have even broken up, because Don Simpson only died, I think, a year or two after, but they actually did break up. And apparently Don Simpson
involved with him. Is it because of, like, why would he think that this one is particularly more stupid than some of the other big blockbusters?
I don't know. Maybe he thought he was leaning too far into the stupidity and audiences wouldn't accept it or something like that.
Least, like you could say, I guess with The Rock, it's like taken seriously in a sense, even though it's super over the top and whatever. Same with Top Gun and all of that. But I guess when it comes to this, it does become more parody, a little bit of satire. And so I guess he wasn't interested in that. Yeah.
I mean, in fairness, in the movie, they constantly, and we'll talk about it more later, but they constantly keep talking about like, wow, all of this, us on this airplane. It's always just like, oh, these guys, all these guys on one airplane. Like that's like the running joke.
Yeah, it's very self-referential the entire time. I think they even have characters, and they do it in both movies, where they're outwardly saying like how insane the situation is that they're in. So it is very self-aware in that sense.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like, again, like Bruckheimer just came up with an absurd concept and was like, okay, now let's hire the team who could kind of put this together. So maybe it was the fact that it was reverse engineered and it wasn't like, a writer came to them with a spec script and then they just kind of decided to blow it up with their own commercial style that they have, or, maybe that was why Don Simpson had colder feet about it. I do know that like this wasn't handed to their best, for example. Like it doesn't sound like Bay or Scott were interested in this, and which is why it's directed by a guy named Simon West, who happened to be another British music video and commercial director brought over to the United States, just like Tony Scott. So clearly they were like, we wanted Tony Scott. We found a guy who's sort of like Tony Scott and who would also do a big flashy, you know, like American popcorn movie like Top Gun, like how he did. And, you know, the formula really worked for us. But it's interesting to look at the rest of West's career because clearly he is just, you know, doing a copycat technique of style because, you know, nothing else that he made basically ended up looking like this. Not his Tomb Raider movie that he did with Angelina Jolie, not his Expendables sequel that he did, his stupid horror When a Stranger Calls.
That one's a really dull one. He didn't quite know how to do suspense. He's at least a little bit better at the big action stuff.
Yeah, well, it also helps that he had, you know, sort of people to model it after. Like, it's so much like diet Michael Bay in terms of what he's trying to do visually and with the camera and everything.
Oh,
like,
yeah, Con Air is like, it really does feel like it was Michael Bay's assistant that did this, but he like knew all the tricks, but not quite how to apply them with as much electricity. And don't get me wrong, I really do enjoy this movie. Con Air is great. It seems like, I don't know if Simon West... he was just very good at replicating maybe because with this one, although it isn't Michael Bay, he gets pretty close. And that is something interesing to look at.
Yeah, it still tastes pretty good, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
There's such a maximalism. There's such an unabashed maximalism with Bay compared to West where you can kind of, it's not quite as like full throttle. It's like a movie like Bad Boys 2 compared to like a movie like Con Air. It's just completely different. You know what I mean? Like this, there's just something about Bay where he's leaning into everything and he's like does not care. There's such a big maximalism with Bay. There's such like a maximalist ambition with Bay that like West is missing a little bit when you watch this.
Yeah, you can tell that it's been grafted into the concept. Like the concept is we need to go big, we need to go crazy. The actors are game to go to that place with him. But in terms of style, and the style works. We'll talk about it, but like the movie definitely works and it accomplishes what it's setting out to do. It is one of those things where you kind of go, it is clear West is just not as much of a visual technician, and he's not as amazing with some of the clean cutting. You know, the fights, especially in this, I do think are pretty inelegant, and they just kind of crank up the electric guitars and are like, that's good enough. You know, he hits the guy. Yeah, so there's a little bit of there's a little bit of like a generic copycat element to it, and part of it is West, part of it is the fact that, you know, you just have like the guy who wrote like Venom and like the Jumanji movies for The Rock is like, you know, coming up with this concept. Although I will say there are some pretty crazy turns of phrase and dialogue in here. I think around this time, this writer had just done he did Gone in 60 Seconds, also starring Cage. He did Kangaroo Jack,
which we did find out when
That's electric. He did Kangaroo Jack. That's kind of fire.
Yeah. And we did find out with Kangaroo Jack when we were making jokes about it in the Discord that it was originally supposed to be like an R-rated crime film, and then the studio, I think, is what cut it down and then put the CGI kangaroo in a lot more and all of that and turned it into a kids film. So maybe there was some elements that he would there's
some more connective tissue there than you'd think.
I've always thought that Jerry O'Connell should have had a second life. So
so you got a writer of all of this, also High Fidelity. I forgot that kind of gets thrown in there a little bit too. But and then shot by David Tattersall, who's probably better known for his digital photography on, you know, the George Lucas Star Wars prequels, the Wachowski sisters Speed Racer, but also shot a whole bunch of hilarious trash into the 2000s. The Keanu Reeves Day the Earth Stood Still remake, that other gloriously bad Cage movie, Next, where he plays Chris Angel if he could see into the future, like Deja Vu style.
Yes. Amazing.
And what's just crazy is to see that nobody else's work who worked on this film, not the writer, director, cinematographer, nothing else they ever shot in their career ended up looking like this ever again. So I am going to say that I think the auteurs and bona fides here are going to have to be laid at Jerry Bruckheimer's feet, because this movie is full throttle a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. You could watch this a lot. You could pair it with The Rock. You could pair it with Crimson Tide. You could pair it with one of the Tom Cruise ones even a little bit. And there is some crossover in some of the crazy, you know, dollies and the sunsets and the music. And I mean, the pop country ballad in this one that was both nominated for an Oscar and a Razzie for Best and Worst Song of the Year. It straight up sounds like it could have been like a Top Gun B-side or something like that, you know. So this is
absolutely.
This is the Jerry Bruckheimer show with the huge epic dolly pan maneuvers, and it's so ridiculous in conception, and the character actors, as Jason was saying, are just so into this, and this still just kind of ends up working. And I will say also, this movie gets the bump that all of these movies kind of do from this era now, where it's just like, man, look at the effects, look at the effort and the analog, the explosions and the miniatures they would have had to build,
At the beginning of the movie, the opening credit scenes with the rain and the oil rig that's in the background, and the Mobile, Alabama kind of like that stuff that's not happening anymore.
No.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, we talk about it all the time now, how it's like everything that would have been done now in this movie would have looked like CGI, would have had much less miniature sets. Like, I mean, we'll get to it, but the end when they do the whole Vegas Strip crash and everything like that, like most of that's miniature work, and it just, all those things just add an extra weight and life to a movie. And I miss this kind of filmmaking, especially when it comes to the big action blockbusters. It just feels so massive, it's
massive squibs, massive explosions,
and then massive egos and massive characters. You just love to see it.
The characters are like just they're such as, and also just huge attempts at like feelings and emotions that the movie maybe doesn't necessarily earn in terms of character specificity. Yeah, it's really sentimental.
It's wild. Like it even starts with like, Cage like being like, he goes down to his wife's stomach when he's still a soldier, before he's the con, and he's saying like, is that my daughter in there? And it almost feels like something you'd see. And I say this sometimes on the show, honestly, maybe too often, but it does feel like a parody that you'd see in something like The Simpsons or South Park, where it's just like, it's my baby, that whole thing. And I love how overly sentimental it is. And even when he gets in the fight with the people that are hitting on his wife, and this is how he gets to be an inmate, it's pouring rain, and you just see like his saddened face as he's getting beat up in front of his wife before he finally fights back. And it's just, I love the sentimentality. It's ridiculously over the top.
The hound dog guy, is that Waingro, by the way? Am I bugging?
I you know what? I didn't clock it actually, but that might be because there are so many faces in this movie. So many recognizable faces that
Or is he? No. Sorry, he's not Waingro. He looks like him a little bit. He might be Aiden from Sex and the City, actually. Sorry.
Just another grubby guy from the mid-'90s who's really disgusting that they love having, and is meant to be the counterpoint to, Nicolas Cage's Cameron Poe, who is one of the, just the most honorable Army Ranger who has ever lived. Going into this, I was reminded of the comedian Stavy Baby's review, where he was basically like, Cameron Poe is perhaps the most, heroic character in the history of modern cinema. And like, aside from
Kevin Gage.
Oh, is it? Oh, shit.
Kevin Gage. Yeah.
Let's go.
Kevin Gage as Billy Joe, a gangster whom Poe kills in self-defense.
God damn. Well, there you have it. Waingro does make an appearance, and Nick Cage does have to kill him right after the montage of flags and salutes and the archival footage about all of these men who have served their country, because Rangers lead the way before we pick up at the Alabama bar, and the country rock love ballads are playing. The How Do I Live Without You, and functionally it is like the same bar as like Top Gun. Like it's the girl is working there. You can imagine Tom Cruise walking into it and ordering a drink, but at this time it is Nick Cage returning home from Desert Storm, and other than a proclivity towards kind of revenge and violence, he is the most like upstanding man in the bar. He's dancing with his wife. He's dealing with the regular assholes and everything who are belittling him and harassing her. And when he gets into the fight outside to kind of like, it's clear it's in self-defense, but there is like, it's played up that he's a violent guy, and the extremity of it, the huge fire, the rain, the mud puddles, the machinery in the back.
And you have the wife before, like in the bar, being like, "No, you don't do that. You're a changed.
You can't go back to the old ways."
Yeah, exactly. You can't let that monster out of you, like that kind of thing.
You can't let him affect you.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but it's like, look, righteous ultra violence can be done well. You know,
That's
like
right.
that's what the movie is ultimately about. Is you need a Cameron Poe to know when to do it and to know when to fight for the right helpless person. And in this case, you know, he accidentally kills one of the blue collar assholes who is, you know, disrespecting him and his wife. And his lawyer too also says, you know, you should plead guilty, because if you plead guilty, you only get 1 year. He's like, but I'm not guilty. Like, it was self-defense. But he pleads guilty anyway. And the judge goes, because you are a walking, talking, deadly weapon with all your training, 10 years. And all of a sudden, it's like the Raising Arizona montage in prison, where it's just like, he's watching his good old Southern daughter grow up in the letters. He's working out his body and his mind. He's got his
the
textbooks.
Alabama accent and everything.
Nick Cage's Alabama accent is incredible.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
incredible. I also like how the Con Air like the Con Air credit pulls up right after his girlfriend's like crying in court. It's like Con Air, and then it like goes to like in prison.
It's almost like a gunshot into
go.
the face of the audience, like Con Air. There it is.
And I like how like they show how focused he is and how he doesn't get into any trouble. So he's only working out, writing letters to his daughter, and ignoring all of the riots that are going out on it in his cell, because he just can't be a part of them. He's just staying good so that he can get there on July 14th. And that's the date. That's the important date when he gets
he's
to
like
get
Jesus.
out.
He's almost like Jesus. He's like it's the blames. He's like, the blame's on me. Gotta take the blame.
Yeah, totally. And the way they shoot him too, like there's two different shots that would remind you of Michael Bay. Once again, Michael Bay would probably add like a spin in there or something. But they do have a couple
the big push in on the breeze blowing through his hair.
Yeah, which is great. And then of course the big one that we see a little later in the desert, where he does like a wink and then walks away from the camera after successfully tricking one of the bad guys. So yeah, he is definitely painted as like just this untouchable hero who's more intelligent, but also more emotionally intelligent as well. He's willing to love, and he's got something to fight for, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I also love how this is kind of a movie in and of itself. Like, here's just a guy who goes to prison. He comes out, a little bit of a rehabilitated man. He gets on parole. He's going to see his daughter. That is like kind of just, you're setting up a movie as is. But then it's like the Jerry Bruckheimer touch is, okay, so we've set up this great arc for this Army Ranger who did something bad and is, rehabilitated. What if when he's being transported home, he has to be transported on the Fairchild C-123 Jailbird, the sweet bird of freedom, a ship designed to transport exclusively the worst of the worst criminals.
Yes.
And then he has to go Die Hard mode, like on that plane. Essentially, he needs to, they start doing a prison break on board, and this is clearly set up just for the different taglines that they could use, because I kind of scrubbed the internet looking for some of the various taglines that they used, and it was like putting all their rotten criminal eggs in one airborne basket, or they were on deadly ground but now they have wings, I think one character in the movie says one too, where he's like, somehow they managed to get every creep and freak in the universe on this one plane, it's such like a ridiculous concept, and it really is made or broken on the actual criminals that you have on your plane. Because if this element of it I don't think works, this is not as fun to watch. It's probably a bit of a chore to watch at 2 hours long. But the fact that every character is given a really, really quick, cliche setup, and then they just have them collide into each other at like a breakneck pace, and they just go, that's your movie. That's all you need to do. It almost doesn't matter that technically these aren't really written characters that much. There is some personality to their dialogue. I imagine some of it also was just the actors finding the personality on set a little bit too, and in how they collaborated. I did read a interview with Danny Trejo where he said that there was so much like active testosterone on set that they were like, you know, like one actor would like try to spit like the biggest glob of spit onto the floor, and all the other actors would like kind of imitate him and see if they could get it further. And he was like, there was like an infectious tough guy energy to having all of these
vibe, you know.
Yeah,
that's so funny.
They were
so
wilding out.
Weird.
Yeah, that's hilarious. It's also like even the plot itself, like it seems like a simple enough plot, but then they start to involve like the John Cusack character and the DEA, and then all this like at a certain point they even stop halfway through the movie to go to a certain spot to pick up more prisoners, so you have more personalities coming on board to interact with the rest of the people you are already familiar with in the first half of the movie. And it does create different scenes and just different environments for them to interact in over and over and over again. And I agree, it seems like this wouldn't work for 2 hours, but they figured out how to have these very simple, easy to understand personalities, but are so different from one another that they can't help but clash whenever there is finally the scene that they interact in. It milks that for 2 hours. It's great.
Yeah, it's so wild just holding on to all of these various characters that you've got, because we're introduced to them almost like you're looking at
characters.
Yeah, you're looking at like a lineup or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have the one mass murderer, William Bedford, played by Nick Chinlund, who's the guy who killed his wife and his family and her dog. And I think Steve Buscemi at one point is like, you know, he's just misplaced rage. Like, name your cliche. You know, mother held him too much or not enough. He's blast picked at kickball. You know, whatever. You know, now he's angry and he just fucking freaks out. You have a straight up serial rapist, John Baca, Johnny 23, played by Danny Trejo. They all have like wrestler names.
I like how John Malkovich's character like does not respect Danny Trejo. He's just like, he's like, rape, not my kind of thing.
But yeah, nobody can, because Danny Trejo's entire personality, like, he all but says, like, you know, my thing is raping, and boy, I love raping. You know, like that. Basically, that is his character. Well, he literally has a line where he's like,
that's just like he actually is like the most evil guy in the whole shit. He's just like, oh, this is just my shit. That's all I do.
Oh yeah, he's totally set up there so that you get the punchline of Nick Cage when he eventually gets into the huge fight with all of them, and he's smashing his face into a steel cage. And you get Cage shouting, "Don't treat women that way," you know.
This is a feminist film.
It really is such a feminist. It's incredible.
Yes,
it's such a feminist movie. By the way, I also love Sergeant Trucker from Heat, McKetty Williamson as Baby O, the cellmate.
Oh yeah,
Baby O's great. Yeah,
I want to like just name off some of these names, because you're right. Every con has a nickname of some kind, and you have like the Virus, the Marietta Mangler.
I was gonna say not only that, Cyrus the Virus, which is that just feels like a wrestler name.
I love the big
Cyrus
guy.
is the best. I mean, he's the greatest.
I love the big guy with the long hair, who at first I thought was actually what's his name? He's the Snake. He was an older wrestler, really huge guy with long hair. But anyway, his name is Swamp Thing, and
Swamp Thing,
so
played by
too,
MC Gainey. Yes,
they don't just have a moment or two, or maybe when they're just interacting with each other, and that's when they say the name. Once you hear the nickname, that's how they're referenced by every character throughout the entire movie. So it's so funny.
Speaking of comics too, calling him Swamp Thing, that's so funny.
It's so funny to just watch them in dialogue be like, we've got to get Diamond Dog, and Swamp Thing is on the run, or he stole the plane, or like whatever it is. It's just
Diamond Dog, fucking Ving Rhames, who they introduce as, you know, a quote unquote former general of the Black Guerrillas who blew up a meeting at the NRA, saying, I quote, "They represented the basest negativity of the white race," and he wrote a book in prison called Reflections in a Diamond Eye, which the New York Times called a wake-up call for the black community, and they're talking to Denzel about the movie rights.
That shit was so so this is actually my first time watching Con Air. So that shit, when I saw it, I had to like pause it and replay it. I was like, yo, that's so funny.
It's such a crazy line.
It's such a crazy line. Like the racial, we'll get to the racial humor in this later too. In this movie, the racial humor in this movie is insane. It's like Sopranos level to me.
Well, yeah, they basically have Dave Chappelle introduced so that they can be like, how racist can you be to the one indigenous prisoner for like 5 minutes?
Yeah, that's true.
And then also set him on fire.
Yeah.
Which is just...
How about on the way to the plane, Guard Bishop and Poe and their interaction? Guard Bishop's like, you got something to live for there, Poe. Yeah. like Poe shows his daughter and she's like, you got something to be straight with, Poe, or what does he say? She's like, you got something to live straight with or whatever. Yeah, live straight for or something like that.
It's pretty wild
like,
the way that eventually, I think even Malkovich's character starts saying really offhanded shit about his daughter by the end of this, just to get him pissed off. Like, so some of the dialogue is real like seedy and gross, and in a mostly entertaining way, but it does get close to the threshold, which is, probably part of its charm, but it's wild.
Oh yeah, I mean, like one of the most bad taste things I've ever seen in a like summer pop blockbuster movie is when they eventually introduce Steve Buscemi, who is basically given like the full on like Hannibal Lecter mode treatment as he's loaded into the plane. They all talk about him like, he makes the Manson family look like the Partridge family, and he's got like the evil middle part hair that he's got, and his whole deal is that, he has murdered like 30 something people, a lot of women specifically. And he has literally, he says a line at one point where he's like, he drove across 3 states wearing one of the girls on his head like a hat. So he is like just like an absolute psycho Ted Bundy style murderer. And there's a whole sequence during one of the action scenes where they keep cutting away to him who has like escaped from the fighting and is just kind of hanging out in the periphery near the desert strip. And there's a whole cross-cutting back and forth tension established with, he runs into a little girl who's having a little tea party by herself next to the airfield, and it's a will they won't they sort of tense moment, and it's literally, is he going to assault this child and wear her like a skin suit? Like that is the tension of the scene, which is just how long they let that thought linger in the audience's mind is like
the
genuinely
action sequence.
Fucking,
they just keep cutting back to it. And
it's psychotic.
It's so strange too, because during that action sequence, like we've been saying with the movie, it's very big and over the top. So you're kind of going through like these explosive shots, and then you go back to this, and it's just this mix of like explosive action that's over the top and just some of the most gross context of a man and a little girl talking that you could possibly come up with. And they just keep going back and forth. Your brain just gets like shattered essentially.
She's like, mister, you look sick. He's like, what makes you think that?
At one point he starts like singing like one of the little like nursery rhymes with her or something like that. He's got the whole world in his hands or whatever, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. The whole world in his hands. And that's kind of like the signifier that he's decided not to slaughter this poor defenseless 6-year-old.
Yeah, that was nice of him. It's a more righteous decision than you would expect made of Cyrus the Virus, played by John Malkovich, who is just absolutely
so good,
chewing through the entire movie. Honestly, it's not far off from some of his performance lines that he was doing in The Line of Fire.
Dude, I was just going to say that.
Clint Eastwood, which we talked about a few months back with Will Menaker, and we just went wild for his performance in that film, and you can feel like he was probably cast in this because of that. And he is just like he is the smart asshole of the entire crew. They're just like, he's really bettered himself inside. He's earned 2 degrees, including his Juris Doctorate. He's also killed 11 fellow inmates, incited 3 riots, and escaped twice. And he likes to brag that he's killed more men than cancer.
Oh my God.
Malkovich is incredible on this. Like, I mean, the line readings, the swagger, the like kind of like weird like smile he has where his like teeth are kind of yellow, but they're still kind of like pretty.
He's kind of unreal in the sense that he always just kind of looks like your average dude. Like in
also
this, he's
beard.
got the bald head and a goatee, but he is the coolest motherfucker that you've ever seen on screen, no matter what. He's unbelievably charismatic. It's crazy, his skill at just delivering, and he'll deliver like incredibly evil lines. And I think most actors, when doing this, would probably go for a more over-the-top quality of delivering. But he just finds this way of making it condescending and just... He's very comfortable with saying it a lot of the time when his character.
He also loves to extend lines and over enunciate lines to the point where they sound like a way that a normal person wouldn't say them, which kind of leads you to believe that they have more like conviction or like venom to them the way that he says them. Like one of my favorite lines is during the prison break sequence itself, which is wild because they're midair. All the prisoners, Dave Chappelle lights one of the prisoners on fire. It starts a whole kerfuffle with the guards, and then Ving Rhames is like immediately like cutting guards' throats with handcuffs, which you see in gruesome detail. There's like crazy, huge squibs and Dutch angles and slow motion electric guitar licks while they're all starting to kill the guards and take their way over. And John Malkovich eventually gets a gun and gets into the cabin where he has the pilot at gunpoint, and he's basically like, you're gonna tell them that everything is fucking okay, and he's just like, or I'm gonna shoot you. He's like, well, you can't shoot me, like I'm the pilot who's gonna fucking fly the plane. And he's just like, do I look like a sane person? Like, I don't think that far ahead. So I will literally just fucking shoot you if you don't do what I say. He's like, okay, I'll do it. And he says, and you better or else. And this line stuck in my head for days after watching it. The next set of wings you'll see are the flies buzzing around your rotting corpse. And like, that's how he delivers lines. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And he does. He adds kind of like almost a breathiness in between certain words to elongate them. And the enunciation on
this is your captain speaking. Yeah. Welcome to Con Air.
He's so fucking good. He knows exactly what he's doing, but he has such a level of control. He doesn't let himself get too excited, even though you'd think that he would in this just kind of position that he's in with this character. But the level of control and charisma is unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. It has kind of like a combination of both control and charisma. It's really interesting, as opposed to like the next movie we're going to talk about, and as opposed to other performances in this one, which are kind of like purposely over the top. Like I think Malkovich is like he brings such a professionalism to this over the top movie, and he kind of can make it so real. To the point where it's like, okay, you actually believe everything that's happening because he's just so controlled with everything. I think he's great.
Yeah, it is smart for him to be like grounded as opposed to some of the other ones. Even though like none of them, and for good reason, don't go as over the top as when we'll get to like Face Off and stuff. But there's like a core reason for that. But Malkovich definitely has more of a grounded sense to him, so that because he's kind of the main focus, right? Whether it be Cage or Malkovich, that's usually what it's focusing on. And then, they'll cut back to the DEA and Cusack and stuff like that to set something up, usually for those two characters to have a new interaction with. So, yeah, you kind of need that. And not to say, though, like Cage isn't, speaking on his performance, he does have that, like what we were talking about, the sentimentality aspect of it. He does have some wild deliveries that we're used to, like when he, I think he realizes that he's not gonna possibly be able to see his daughter when he wanted to, so he lets out this kind of like scream, just kind of out of nowhere. At least in the sense that it goes from 0 to 100 in the energy, which we're very used to from him. But it really fits in this kind of movie. But a lot of the time, he is just kind of playing that kind of that action hero where he's just tough. He's in the tank top. He's intelligent enough to play with the prisoners. But ultimately, he's just trying to get back to his family. The way that Cage performs
as like one of the like just as psychotic prisoners who wants to be involved with them, he spends about half the movie like pretending that he's on their side while also secretly, making moves against them essentially, because basically they just do the Die Hard thing. He's got to be John McClane. He's on the plane, and he could subvert their plans from the inside, and he can also protect some of the people who need protection, because at one point they actually do say, hey, whoever wants off can just get off on the next stop, because part of their plan is they're actually going to land the plane, pick up some more prisoners, then take the plane to, like a non-extradition country or whatever. So that's how they plan on. That's kind of like their overall plan, which is a ridiculous plan. Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts to that plan.
It's really ridiculous, but I love the scene where they transfer the guys from what the planes and then they get Swamp Thing and they get the few other guys.
The fact that they have to do it in a sandstorm and they have to dress the guards up as the prisoners and like load them off and
and then they dress up as the
guards are just so tight. The guards are just so fucking pissed too, and like they're like talking, but they're like fucking muffled and shit.
Yeah,
it's great.
I was also thinking when they come up with their plan and they say like we're gonna go to a different country where we won't be in trouble any longer, and then they mentioned something like it's gonna be paradise and all that. I'm like, it doesn't seem like you've thought about like after you land how you're gonna set up this little, like, I don't know, would it be like a compound of prisoners and you're just gonna live happily ever after with like hookers and rum and like I don't know what would be heaven to them, but it's I like that they're just like, we'll get to that whatever country it happens to be, and it's smooth sailing from there, no problems. They don't really talk about it much.
I mean, even how committed Cage is to like actually stopping them as well. You feel like another version of this movie would have more of like a moral reckoning about like, can he really help the one like female guard on the plane, Sally Bishop? Can he actually get the ticking time clock element where Baby O his friend is diabetic and he has to get him his insulin within 2 hours or he's gonna die. Like that's another element that gets thrown at him, and he's like, I can save all of these people, and there's no way that guy got his insulin in time based on the time frame that they set up in the movie. But definitely. And he also gets shot at one point too, but that ends up kind of working out for him. But it's one of those things where he is like cartoonishly heroic and like willing to go the extra mile for even just one person. Even though it was like on the it's like that trope of, the last day before retirement, like he was just getting out on parole. He was just about to go see his family. And now he's got to find himself in this situation where he's doing shit like dumping corpses out of the plane, but like writing, messages on them for the DEA agents and stuff like that, which I kind of like, are they actually going to be able to read that after that corpse like explodes?
It's mangled. Yeah, absolutely.
And they do actually show a very Michael Bay gag, the most Michael Bay gag in the entire movie, which is when he throws that corpse out and we actually have the camera shot that follows the dummy on its way down. Yeah. And then it crashes into the Colonel from Twin Peaks I forget his name, who just freshly waxed his car. And, he's like really admiring the beauty of this car that he's driving around. And then a corpse fucking smashes through the windshield and like gore, starts hitting them and shit like that.
Yeah.
They do another.
By the way, Chappelle, the corpse is Pinball Parker. And
it's Dave Chappelle too. Oh my God.
He gets run over by the landing gear trying to get back on
during
the
takeoff.
Which is like, Chappelle is the one who like everyone was so racist to because he's like a fucking crack addict.
Yeah.
It gets a little dicey.
It's really funny
in that sense. Yeah,
I know. It's funny, but it is a little dicey. But what's also really funny?
It's committed to it.
The guy sitting next to Chappelle is like, I guess maybe like a Native American guy.
Yes.
And Chappelle goes, "Don't get all wounded knee on me, man."
Yeah. And is that the moment that like 2 seconds later he sets him on fire, and that's how they start
he makes him the distraction by setting him on fire too.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
It does feel like they just like dropped Dave Chappelle and they were like, dude, riff it up. Like just
totally
try and get people laughing and offended in the cabin.
Has the line where it's like I can't remember the line. It's he's like the Department of Corrections when he's flirting with the girl in the hangar and he's putting the transponder in the plane. Like it's a bunch of just ridiculous scene after
he's
ridiculous
hamming
scene. Oh yeah, and I do like that they get to give him like a lot of physical things to do in the beginning because like you said, he like after he sets sets the dude on fire as kind of the distraction to set the whole thing off. He is also the one that gets like tackled against the door from guards, and then he opens up the cages and everything like that. And he is a big part of the riot. So it was kind of cool to see Dave Chappelle play something like that. But he is definitely still doing his Chappelle thing, which he's very, very good at. I also, just speaking briefly on the Nick Cage performance too, I like, because a lot of the time when they do these like macho hero things, even if the stakes are so large as to seeing your family again or something like that, they don't usually bring out that super dramatic actor side. And I like that he did like pull up the Academy Award winner out of him when they mentioned that, you know, they're not going to go to Alabama to see his daughter any longer because they've taken over the plane. He actually does have like tears in his eyes, and he's crying throughout this entire thing in moments. And it does add a little bit of an element that you don't normally see in these types of movies, which is kind of cool.
Well, yeah, because it's funny. It is like such like a basic emotional setup. Yeah. And also clearly just an excuse for him to do crazy violence when he eventually gets to unleash it. But it's honorable because of this cartoonishly sentimental and emotional situation that he has been put in, where they have like laid it on so thick how badly he needs to get home and how much of a model prisoner he intentionally was so that he wouldn't get into a situation like this and become like a career criminal who's in prison for his whole life, like one of these guys. And yeah, but yeah, you're right. Like the actors are still committed to that, and it is interesting how much Cage. You know, you can always see him putting the effort in, even in a lot of his like direct to video stuff when he was doing it for a while. You know, there's very few performances I've seen from him where he isn't like trying or he doesn't see something of value to do. And you know, I would. Oh
yeah, I think I saw him in an interview where because I think some people just. Because he did go out and do some of those more like, I don't know what you'd straight to video kind of bad action movies or bad horror movies and stuff, that you get this idea that he would kind of phone it in. But in an interview, he said like, it's like, I never try. I truly never try to phone it in. Even if, you know, whatever the project is, I try to give my 100%. And that is usually why you find when he's in something like that, there's still some parts that are gems. It's just that a lot of the time, you know, the rest of the film doesn't really hold up. But yeah, well, he's a very committed performer, and I always have appreciated that about him.
Yeah, and luckily I do think that like everyone else around him is also pretty committed. Like it sounds like they were all like kind of hyping each other up, and then you know you also have the knockoff bass style that is like making everything that they do seem even bigger as is. So like working all together in tandem, like this is a movie that really does, despite the fact that it's 2 hours long, like it really does move as, you know, Cage starts like earning Malkovich's trust as like the tough like trailer trash operator who wants to be free with them, and but meanwhile sneaking information to John Cusack's U.S. Marshal and the DEA agent played by Calmini, and you know, some
who's great, by the way. Also love his car.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
that gets just wrecked.
His car gets like wrecked, the craziest cameo, which apparently was the like one of the huge like trailer shots. Apparently that was like the moment in 1997 they were trying to sell everyone on, which was like, you know, John Cusack takes his car all the way to the desert strip where they're doing their landing, and the car gets mixed up in the plane when they're trying to take the plane off again, and they literally start dragging the car behind the plane on a wire. And you know, it's this big fancy sports car. It breaks off, it crashes everywhere, and it does lead to like one of the defining lines of the movie, which is Nick Cage just looking at this car latched onto the plane, just being like, you know, on any other day that might seem strange, but today is like a crazy day where if you see something physically absurd like that, it kind of just makes a whole lot of sense on this specific day, because there's like crazy shit that happens in that movie. That fucking lunchbox prison bomb with like just colorful liquid vials in it that look like straight out of a comic book or something.
And before that, they find out like where they're going because Malkovich has left this like symbolic, a bunch of pictures that have the eyes cut out that perfectly align with letters.
He's left like a paper trail of like Da Vinci Code clues.
Yeah, Da Vinci Code clues is a great way to put it. And then
he's got like a fucking outline of a huge ass airplane too. It's like he's got like everything in there. And then the fact that they didn't check this before he got on the plane too was really funny.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious that they like
Cyrus
they basically just open up the cell and it's all there, and you're just like, what have you guys been doing for so long? You just let this guy have the anarchist cookbook. I don't think that was a very good idea. It's very funny, and I
while the
that.
Agents are starting to put the pieces together where they're like, oh my god, all the killers, thieves, and rapists we put on one plane, they've all unionized, like, oh shit, like what the fuck are we gonna do? And they but they're like, well, there's one guy on there who's a U.S. Army Ranger who only committed normal guy manslaughter, so we can ask him to help. And I love that Cole Meany, who is, as Jason said, is very good, and also loved him recently in that Nick Winding Refn miniseries, Too Old to Die Young. He's on that one episode where the Mandy episode with Miles Teller driving as one of the brothers who's feeling really sad.
Yes. Yeah,
but I love that he gets the line where he's just like, dude, we can't trust one guy up there. They don't believe in law or like civilization up there. And John Cusack gets to hit him back with such a writerly line of, the degree of civilization in society can be judged by observing its prisoners. Dostoevsky said that after doing a little time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's great. I also love just his very blatant yelling director DEA guy performance too, when he's saying things like this is a situation that needs to be unfucked right now. That kind of shit.
Yeah, also at one point, him and Cusack both are just allowed to get into like attack helichoppers or whatever and just start like firing rockets at the plane. Because like the whole premise is like, they're just going, well, we're just going to shoot the plane down. We're just going to blow up all the criminals in one place.
Who cares? Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of how they're going about it. And I like that the whole with Cole Meany, his whole like arch is essentially that he becomes, first he's like a homicidal DEA agent, and he becomes not a homicidal DEA agent, and he decides not to blow up the plane. It's great.
That is a great arc. That
is a great arc. Oh man.
Yeah, but all hell breaks loose in like the second half of the film when, like Cage has to, like that one wife killer is the guy who I think finds his parole letter and finds his little bunny rabbit, which is his little toy that he was going to give to his daughter when he met her on his birthday. It's a birthday present.
Right.
And that bit when he's just like, put Bunny back in the box. and the guy doesn't really understand the severity of it. So Nick Cage gruesomely impales the man.
Yes.
Because he would not put his daughter's birthday present down, and finally dons his final look, his like, his white tank top, the blue jeans, just drenched in sweat, in sand, in the middle of this desert airstrip that they've all landed into. And he does, basically start trying to, get involved in a more physical sense, and also trying to save as many lives as possible. One of my favorite moments in the entire film is between him and Ving Rhames, when Rhames is just, as Diamond Dog, he's like I'm gonna execute all these pigs, I'm gonna shoot them in the back of their heads. And Nick Cage is like, well, we can't have that, but he can't also be like, well, I love guards and cops, that's why you shouldn't kill them. So he's like negotiating for the value of them as leverage or whatever. And I love when Ving Rhames calls Malkovich in, because he's like, hey, this guy doesn't want me to kill guards. That's pretty fucking suspicious. He clearly, he's not as immoral as us who are pulling off this crazy mission. And when Malkovich comes in and he's just like, well, it's not difficult to surmise how Nathan here feels about killing guards. And my own proclivities are, well-known and often lamented facts of penile lore. What I'm wondering is why you have any opinion about it at all. And Nick Cage, to his credit, actually gets to deliver a line almost as good, which is like, hey, Cyrus, it's your barbecue, man, and it tastes good. But I was just explaining to Mr. Dog that if it was my barbecue, I would wait for that old jumbo jet in the sky before I start killing, my only leverage. And I think that's the scene that is actually being cross-cut to the scene of Steve Buscemi, finding a little girl in the desert and you being like, is he going to murder her or is he going to resist that urge,
Yeah.
Just such a great section of the movie.
My personal favorite dog and Poe scene is when Poe's like, hey, man, like, you all Black Power stuff, why are you helping the white man? And Big Ray's like, it's a means to an end, my white brother.
Yeah.
Which I think that's really great because it's kind of sort of this subtext about like what it's like as like Black nationalists. There's always a link between Black nationalism, at least like the wrong kind of Black nationalism. There's always like a link between it and kind of like whiteness in a weird way. Like there's always like Black nationalists always kind of have like this sort of like telepathy with kind of like whiteness in this way. Like, like Nation of Islam is kind of like that, where they have this telepathy with like a lot of whiteness. And so it was really funny seeing Dog say that.
Well, yeah. And Nick Cage also tried to play like the hillbilly card a little bit too, where he's just like, like that don't make much sense to me, man. I got my politics. You got your politics. Let's have a discussion about this. And he just totally says like, well, the logic of it, like I'm just going to ride this until it's, out of my self-interest for the time being. And then we'll do the plan.
Yeah. Once we get to that country of paradise,
right?
We'll figure it out then.
Yeah, but I think too around this time Nick Cage and Cusack have to have like the real man to man where they're on opposite sides of the law, but they're kind of working together towards the same plan. It's exactly the same relationship between the one cop in Die Hard who's actually like, hey, we should actually listen to the guy on the inside who's helping us out. But when it immediately switches to a dime to sentimental, when John Cusack is like, I spoke to your daughter today, and he's just like, oh man, I thought I was about to see her, and I'm scared I'm not going to see them. And if you speak to her again, tell her that I love her, that she's my hummingbird, and but I couldn't leave a fallen man behind, and now I'm going to go save the fucking day. Right as it kicks into like the huge massive start of the action set piece that basically finishes out the film, which is I think it's like the National Guard shows up onto the desert airstrip, and all of the convicts happen to have come across a giant cargo hold of munitions, like the kind of cargo hold that like Wile E. Coyote would be storing, like a huge amount of explosives and guns.
Yeah, there's like 20 organized shotguns and like a couple AR-15s. It's just unbelievably wild what they found in there.
Yeah, and it's massive. Like the way that these National Guard dudes are being shot down. At one point, I think is it MC Gainey who's running through the middle of the set piece on like a bulldozer. Like Cage driving like an on fire cop car into people. And the one funny thing about this sequence is that at this point, the criminals and the character actors who are so like playing them so well and so slimy and so charismatically. You kind of root for them against the faceless military force. It's just kind of like the logic of a scene. Like those guys are faceless. You don't know them. They're just coming in, and you're like, I don't know. I don't hate Diamond Dog that bad, Like,
and
I don't want to see him get shot down.
Dog and Cyrus are my guys.
Yeah,
Dog and Cyrus are Cyrus is my guy. I kind of wish Cyrus had gotten off.
And they already make Cole Meany out to be like just the worst human being as a DEA agent. Like Cusack has that I'm the nice guy trying to do good in the system kind of vibe with his character. So by the time you see this like faceless just DEA force going up against them, yeah, you're absolutely right. You're like, Malkovich, Rames, let's fucking go. Just destroy them.
Yeah, Call Meany has that kind of like Irish face where it's just like, this guy looks like a fucking prick, dude.
Yeah, totally. He's so good at playing an asshole. It's unreal.
I know, dude. He should have been in The Departed or something like that. He has that kind of face.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And this has one of the funniest lines in this scene too. It's when they're going after this like this drug dealer, which is what the DEA was originally after before all this mess happens. And Cyrus is going to kill him, and he's like, kind of the fuel is coming out of the plane that he was trying to take off of, and he gets out, and Cyrus takes a cigarette from, I think it's Rame's mouth, and he flicks it, and right before he does that, the guy is like pleading for his life. So he says half of Cyrus. So he goes, Psy. And then Malkovich goes, Anara. And just lights the guy on fire. It's one of the fucking funniest and smoothest bad guy deliveries and lines I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. It's hilarious. I had my cousin beside me, and he doesn't watch too many of these movies. He's a little bit younger, so he hasn't been introduced to the glory that is 90s action films. But he was just like, I am changing my name to Cyrus just so I can pull that on people. But yeah, it's a glorious moment.
I mean, Cyrus the Virus, it's really such a great name.
It is. I couldn't believe they found a way to use his name as something even funnier.
Yeah, and how big and how much the movie escalates as like these character actors are maintaining these kind of like cool or suave performances a little bit.
Oh yeah.
While the movie just keeps being like, now the plane is crashing through the watchtower and exploding the entire watchtower. Now John Cusack is in a fucking helicopter chasing them in the plane. Now they're having fight scenes on the plane while they're being chased. And,
a fire truck chase scene, for God's sake, and a fight scene.
Well, this is one of the craziest things because like the sequence starts out, this big last one when they take off from the desert airstrip and are heading out. I'm not exactly sure which direction, if they're heading towards the country and they happen to just have to crash land in Vegas because the plane's actually getting shot down.
I think that's what it is, because they say that there's like no fuel left or something, so we gotta crash.
Right.
Yeah,
they didn't really think that one through.
No.
But of course, people need to start finding out, Cage's identity as Cameron Poe, that, maybe he is actually trying to subvert their efforts a little bit and spark, a fight on the plane while the agents are flying, the choppers at them and everything. At one point, Baby O gets a shot in the gut. And, he's like, I'm not going to make it, man, and there is no God. I'm not going to heaven, man. And I love Nicolas Cage just looking at him being like, no, you're going to make it. I'm going to single-handedly land this plane and get you your insulin. I'm going to kill everyone on this plane. And I'm going to show you that God does exist.
Yeah, that's such a insanely confident line for someone to have to deliver. I'm going to show you that God exists.
That's how you have to know that, like, they know. Like, that's such a winking line. And to do it before this final set piece goes off too, like, it's practically like they're saying it, I'm going to show you that God exists to the audience. Right as we're about to have this crazy set piece where, Cage is going to like take gunshots point blank, like in the arm and just totally tank it and keeps beating the shit out of people still. That was actually one of the shots I remember seeing when I was younger, and that just lives on in my mind. I actually remembered it being more gruesome because my memory just kind of projected it being like, his whole shoulder was like squibbed up or something like that.
They RoboCopped him or something.
Yeah, but it like that's how my brain remembered it from watching this, because I hadn't watched this since I was like on cable TV when I was younger. But yeah, Swamp Thing having to land them on the Vegas Strip and like seeing the miniature of the plane rip through the Hard Rock Cafe sign and slam into so many objects and street signs and cars and
innocent people.
They also dismember Danny Trejo, who's sitting in the from the inside of the plane, and they eventually crash into the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, which was actually scheduled for demolition around the time that they were shooting this. So some of the images of the Sands Hotel blowing up is just literal documentary footage of them detonating that historic like Las Vegas landmark, that because they were like, hey, badass. But before you blow it up, can we like crash like a plane into it?
Might as well. We're not using it anymore.
Yeah, so like that's really cool. But of course, because it's a 90s action movie, you have to have a finale after the finale. This was just like a thing that so many of them had. One of my favorite examples, obviously Face Off is one of them, but True Lies is also one of my other favorite examples of it. Mm-hmm. And that's where it leads into what Jamie was talking about with Malkovich and Rames still going strong after the plane crashes and they literally like slink out of the plane, hijack a fire truck, and then Cage and Cusack have to get on the cop motorcycles and chase after the fire truck, which turns into crazy stunt heavy moments of like Nicolas Cage jumping off the motorcycle so that it rams into Ving Rhames and blows him up on screen so that he can then grab the ladder on the fire truck and like, do the little like upside down ladder, like workout routine as he gets closer to it, as he gets closer to Malkovich on top.
I love that Malkovich is also on top using the hose to take down some of the cops that are behind them on the motorcycles and stuff. Like they're just using the fire. Even which is funny too. I think before Rhames dies, he's even shown in the fire like outfit and everything, which I just kind of found funny. Because throughout this whole thing, you see them in like different.
He's undercover. He's in disguise.
You see him in the fire truck thing. Yeah, he just keeps taking on like servicemen outfits as he's like doing all this crazy shit. It's hilarious to watch. I love it.
And fighting on top of the fire truck while going under a tunnel, which is like crazy. Malkovich getting stabbed through the like leg with the broken end of like the wooden spear. I was like, where did the spear come from too? That's like a fucking like ancient looking spear.
I love too him getting like tied up to the ladder itself so that he kind of gets slingshotted when they stop and he gets flown through like 2 things of glass and through a bunch of electrical wiring. And I couldn't tell this. Was that also Malkovich that eventually gets like slid into beneath this platform and then gets his head squished? Was that also him?
Yeah, he's the one who flies into like those machines they use to like press the foundations for skyscrapers.
Right, it's so wild.
And there's like a little countdown ticking clock just to satisfy your little lizard brain to be like, oh man, I can't wait for this thing to smash, crush his fucking head.
Right.
Just
my.
What a wonderfully staged piece of just like old analog action craft. It's filled with like even comedic moments too, like Malkovich just at one point punching Cage, but not punching him in the face, just punching him in the bullet wound arm, just being like,
Yep.
Yeah.
And then you get the classic, just super romantic, sentimental wrap up where he finally meets his daughter and gets to see his wife again. I really like
Dude, when that romantic ballad theme kicked back in and it's like instant, and you can see like the car white passing in front of the camera revealing that for some reason his wife and kid were driven to this sudden crash landing crime scene. Where you're like, what?
You're like, hopefully he lives, and if he does,
Cusack was the only one who knew about them. He didn't go back and get them.
I think Cusack is like almost like too nice to like Cage's wife and the kid. It's almost just like, yo, what are they actually doing here?
It seems dangerous.
To me, out of all the things that happened in this movie, that might be the most unrealistic part. Is the fact that like Cage's wife gets treated with like special treatment.
Just there. It's very
also
it's
the
very
birthday
funny.
present bunny surviving the plane crash so he can give it to his daughter.
He reaches into the gutter to get it back. It's so funny.
I like that it's covered in dirt and blood too.
Oh yeah, and there's still like sparks everywhere because they just detonated Las Vegas.
Yeah, and I like that they make it though romantic because they have like a gold lit casino building lighting them up anytime that there's like they're in the background, and then when they go to the other way where the camera would face the other way, it's just like a plane that has destroyed the entire Vegas Strip and killed probably hundreds of innocent people. It's just it's a funny thing to think about. They don't focus on that, but having this overly sentimental ending to such a ridiculous movie really wraps it up nicely.
Yeah, well, and also like a weirdly upbeat kind of conclusion to the whole thing, where it, like even after Cage's, he did his mission, he got back to his family. If that was the emotional catharsis you were looking for, like that's fine. You get him doing the mega tears, you get him laying the southern drawl on that he's got his family back, but the way that it ends, because the actual last scene of the movie is that mass serial murderer Steve Buscemi actually also survived the plane crash and is just out there. And he's roaming free in Vegas, and he's just like, hey, I resisted the urge to kill a little child. So I'm a lucky guy. and he throws he's playing he's at the craps table, and that's the end of the movie. And a friend of the pod, Will Sloan, had a hilarious review about this where he was basically like, it's literally the same ending as Silence of the Lambs, but if it was happy. Yeah. Like, it's like it's just like the cannibal killer is just free, but the movie presents that as like actually kind of, you liked that criminal, and he was willing to be rehabilitated, clearly.
Yeah, he didn't kill that little girl, so like play craps.
I wonder if he's gonna kill the woman that's next to him at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah,
like
totally.
it's like, yeah, maybe he resisted for like 15 seconds, but like this guy clearly had a pattern for many years.
Sure.
Yeah, and then it kicks in Sweet Home Alabama over the roll call montage credits, where all of the
I love when they do this.
Monstrously, charismatic but also violent people we just saw all get gruesomely murdered and learned all of their gruesome backstories. And it's like smiling, like it's like an in memoriam video clip. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God! Just like these loving characters that you just that you adore.
We just had a grand old time. It's so funny.
It is funny. And I like that they make Nicolas Cage's the wink and the leave from camera. Like it's just, and then it fades into the credits and everything. Like they pick them well.
Yeah, well, and that was what was funny, actually. Roger Ebert had a really funny conclusion to his review where he went in 97, where he was basically like, he also noted the very bizarre closing credits with Sweet Home Alabama over all of their smiling faces. And he was like, yes, even Cyrus the Virus and Johnny 23, like the guy whose entire personality was just that he raped people. They might as well have just called him like Mr. Rape or something.
They did. Well, they do say that the 23 is to signify, I think, how many people he's raped. Something like that. Well,
and his clarification line is it would be Johnny 600 if they knew the full story. Oh, talk about a bad taste line, too.
I forgot about that line.
But yeah, like they're all smiling, and Ebert compared it to a fast food ad. He was like, apparently the strategy is to leave the audience on an upbeat note, but that would require a very short attention span on the part of the audience, and this may just be the movie to assemble that audience. I don't know if he was saying that backhandedly or not. He did give it a positive review, but he's kind of right.
Yeah, no,
the movie is meant to be enjoyed in bursts on cable TV, it feels like, and you could come in for every couple minutes and you'd get a ridiculous one-liner, you'd get a ridiculous character actor performance, or you would get an insane action scene or explosion or squib going off or something. And I've never seen a movie more self-aware that like that it was its eventual destiny.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I don't think this movie, like, Face Off, I think, is actually way more ambitious than this movie is.
Absolutely.
Whereas, like, this movie, like, it really just knows what it is, and it, like, executes that so well. Mm-hmm. You could really go... It's a classic for a lot of people who aren't that into movies. Like, everyone's seen Con Air. Everyone loves Con Air. It's it has so much recognizable people. We're like, that guy. It's that guy. Yeah. You know what I mean?
It kind of sinks into its familiarity. Like, you're familiar with some of these characters themselves. Just you've seen like different iterations of them. You're familiar with the actors. You're kind of familiar with the style because you've seen Michael Bay and Tony Scott before. There's just a bunch of things that make you feel kind of comfortable about the film, even though they have a lot of really seedy, gross dialogue at the same time. But that's just the American way, baby. Come on.
Well, that's just it. It's vulgar in the same way that like just American genre filmmaking could be.
Yes.
So it's the movie equivalent of like the best fast food you've ever had drunk at 3 a.m. You know, like it's the cinematic version of that. I will.
Yeah, it really is. That McDonald's,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That McDonald's at 2 a.m.
Couple McDubs at 3, definitely.
Yeah, it just kind of hits in that way. So if we are pivoting maybe towards the reductive rating round, this actually used to be kind of in like the higher, like really, really high 3 territory for me. But this actually bumped up to kind of like the soft 4 territory for me on this watch. This was the most fun I had ever had with the movie. I think I did finally just let go of like, look, it's not Michael Bay or Tony Scott. It's not going to have the same sophistication of the craft. It's not going to have the same magic touch. It's not going to have like those beauty moments like we're about to talk about when you have a literal genius of visual craft behind something that's this absurd and ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, it is diet visual and sonic copycatting of that particular style, right down to the epic dolly pan shots of the character actors, the Top Gun era romantic ballads and electric guitar licks when someone, throws a punch or someone's shoulder fucking explodes from a squib or something, or a piece of metal slams through, a giant building and explodes it, that kind of stuff. But it's just, somehow Bruckheimer strong-armed 3 people who would never make a film that would ever look like this again. And the one of the greatest, deepest benches of character actors you've ever seen in a movie, and was just let everyone cook on this magnitude.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where you kind of have to respect it on that level. And, despite the fact that, it's crass and commercial, there's a lot of great analog effects to it. There's a lot of great, insane one-liners and performances. It's very loose and efficient, and it moves at a breakneck pace. And it's pure 90s macho action movie magic at a certain point. And, I really did have a blast with it on this watch.
Yeah, I
had a blast too. It was my first time actually seeing Con Air, and it was shocking that was my first time, but it didn't exceed my expectations, but it was so comfortably good that I was like, yes, Con Air. It's like, it didn't exceed it. I was like, okay, this is probably going to be what it is. It's not like when I watched Face Off for the first time, I was like, wait, am I watching like the greatest action movie ever?
Like no one can prepare you for Face Off. It's a totally different experience. Like you'll go in being like, oh, I've seen a couple of the clips on the Nick Cage YouTube montages, or I've heard a couple friends describe the plot to me, and then you actually sit down to watch it and you're like, this is actually one of the most insane things that anyone ever made.
Yeah, truly.
Yeah.
So this doesn't have that quality, unfortunately. You're right.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a little bit different, but still like hot fun, like great fun. You know what I mean? Like, really distinct faces, really distinct actors. There's not one actor who doesn't like step up to the plate. Really, like I'm trying to think of one performance where I'm like, but everyone's like really, really good. I don't quite find Poe as dynamic of a character as I know that's the point, but I don't quite find his character like as dynamic as the character actors, as like the supporting guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, like it's just we'll talk about rating, but for me, it's not quite as great as Face Off, because Face Off has those 2 leads are just so good. It's still great fun. Yeah, I mean, I have it going on mute right now on my TV, and it's just doing the dog scene where he's like, "I can play house, nigga." It's like what the fuck?
Oh yeah.
Oh man, the racism in this it's very Sopranos level, where everything's so funny to the point where it's just like you just kind of like it's just like fuck it, this is just so funny.
Yeah, because even the way they use race in this is like just fucking cartoonish as all hell.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's at least easier to forgive in that sense, and it is honestly funny. Some of the shock value in it is quite hilarious, and just the way they're putting some of these lines together and delivering them is unreal.
I think at one point Pinball asks Cyrus, he's like, "Hey, yo, Cyrus, man, you ain't really mean that, right, man?" And Cyrus like, "No, I meant every word."
Right. Yeah, with like the most straight face and everything. Yeah,
with the most straight face, Cyrus like, "No, I actually meant every word."
Yeah. Would you probably give it a 4? What are you thinking?
I give it a 4 stars out of 5. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I think I'm there too. It's pretty solid for me. I think that just the amount of craziness that they toss at you really does fill up that 2 hours, and you don't feel it as much as you'd think that you would with such a simple premise. They're just constantly throwing new characters, and because they're such simple characters to take in, it doesn't feel overwhelming by any means. It just is like, okay, let's see this crazy person interact with another crazy person, and that's just a lot of fun. It is very much like Diet Michael Bay in that sense, but I do think when it comes to somebody replicating a style, Simon West is doing this quite well. And so I have to give him a little bit of respect for that.
What's a better movie, Con Air or Bad Boys 2?
Oh, Bad Boys 2.
Oh, Bad Boys 2.
Sure, yeah. I think Bad Boys 2 is like a masterpiece of an action film. It's up there with Face Off for me. So, Yeah, it's Simon
also
West,
just
like,
pure evil id on display too. I almost wish that maybe this had a little bit more of that. It leaned fuller into that, because like Michael Bay just goes like full ugliness to the point where it almost does. It's so maximalist with its depiction of like American vulgarity that it almost circles back around to being a critique. Even though I know it's not, and Michael Bay isn't, but it's just like, that's how crazy, like immature and hyper violent and like insecure that movie almost is, but with such like, you know, commitment and confidence to the craft and the incoherency of it all. It's
there's an honesty to that, and I think that like, that's why. That, like with Michael Bay, like you said, he's probably not critiquing himself, but he just does it because he's so honest and really does wear his heart on his sleeve about what he loves.
It's just who he is, man.
Yeah, so it just says it without even him having to like really truly imply it. So I love that, and Simon West is missing that.
Yeah, there's a little bit more of like a knowing winkingness to it a little bit, where you know.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, just every performance is spectacular. I do love it. It is strange to see a movie that looks like it does, and having these people not make a movie that looks like it again. That is strange. Like, I think you're right about Bruckheimer really at least focusing hard on what this movie is going to look like, and made them do it. It seems, because nothing in their filmography looks like this. It's crazy. So, and even I like that even actors or characters rather, like Cusack's character, are still doing over the top shit. Like, he's the one that destroys the car with the crane at a certain point and stuff like that. You know, like every character in this, even the straight laced guy, is doing batshit insane stuff. So
this is the kind of movie where Nick Cage goes, "I'm going to show you that God exists," and then struts away and blows up the Las Vegas Strip off the face of the earth.
Yeah,
you
believe
like
you believe that he's going to show you the Lord for sure.
Yeah, it's like literally Poe is like Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ was like a violent human being.
Which is very much going to rhyme when we move on into Face Off, which I think we have to do here, where isn't this religious? You know,
and it is. Oh my God, is it ever? This is my religion coming up here.
Yeah, but that being said, I think that is going to wrap it up for Con Air. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about Face Off. Stick around.
I don't care if I live.
You're not having any fun, are you, Sean? Try terrorism for hire. We'll blow some stuff up. It's more fun.
Plan B. Let's just kill each other.
All right, we are back, and we are talking Face Off, the 1997 American action thriller film directed by John Woo and starring in two of their best performances of all time. I think many of us on the show are going to agree today, Mr. Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. Now, this is one of those movies where one of my favorite things is to ask people like what the first experience was like watching this. So what was the context, Jason, for your first watch? What did you have an idea of going in, and how was your face appropriately melted when you actually watched it?
So my friend Alphonse, who is the staff writer for Pitchfork, and Alphonse Pierre, who I actually sent him this podcast, and I was like, yo, you should see if you want to go on, because Alphonse is a movie guy too. He sent me a DVD for my birthday a few years ago and sent me Snake Eyes and Face Off, like a double disc thing, as a birthday present, which is very sweet.
That's awesome.
And so I popped in Face Off, and I was like, Nick Cage, Travolta, cool. This is going to be fun, obviously, because Nick Cage and Travolta. I was not prepared for two things. The first thing is I was not prepared for how great both leads are. Like, they're both so good in the way where it's like, it's the type of performance you think about all the time. Like, it's kind of like Denzel in Training Day, one of those like superstar performances where it's like, holy shit, I'm keep thinking about this. Like, it's not going to win any awards, but it's the type of performance that like people really love, like regular people love. And like just fans, movie fans, and like if you're a fan of movies, like you get this performance and you get why it's so great and you love it. I also kind of think that both men are so good at. They're really good at playing the other like face of the other character, but they both do a great job of doing both of the things. I think when Travolta's playing Castor Troy, he is unbelievable. Like the household stuff and like the daughter and like he's unbelievable.
It's wild. Yeah.
Like it's just wild.
Nothing prepares you
like,
for how like perverse that stuff is.
I know, he's unbelievable. And then when Cage is playing Sean Archer, he's so heartbreaking. Like, it's amazing. Like when he's like, when he's with Shasha's son, like it's incredible. So that's what I wasn't prepared to be like as emotionally heartfelt as I was like when I watched it, and then also like I wasn't prepared for how funny it also can be. Like it can be, it's such a wide shift in mood. The movie, like constantly such a wide shift in mood. And it's a masterpiece. It's one of the greatest movies ever made, and I can't wait to talk about it. Like I can't wait.
Yeah, it's truly like a comedy, an action, a thriller, a crime. It's pretty wild how much he throws into this. And of course, you get the John Woo factor, and we'll get into some details there. But yeah, for me, it was I was 8 to 10 years old, something like that. I think I was in like 4th or 5th grade, and my friend Dylan. I would go over to his place, and he was the guy that like his parents would just let him watch whatever he wanted, no matter what age we were. And Face Off was one that he threw on, and I just like it was like seeing God. I swear to God, like I was obsessed with it from then on. The entire premise of two actors, and at the time I couldn't fully conceptualize like what they were doing artistically. But I just knew that something special was happening here. That's all I could feel. Like I was like, this swap of identity and their performances changing with that was so intriguing to me. And then, of course, you know, gold-plated double guns in slow motion and doves flying. And like, I mean, my 9-year-old brain was melting. It was just so over the top. So yeah, it was overwhelming. But from that point forward, I was like, this is what a good action movie is. And so from a very young age, this movie set a high bar for young Jamie.
I had a similar experience where I was kind of just getting into Nick Cage because he had such a crazy 2000s. And I do think that I can't remember exactly what the first movie of his I ever watched was, but I do remember that he was an actor I actually did follow as I was, kind of just getting interested in movies. Like he was doing, I don't know, National Treasure and Lord of War came out like back to back. I'm pretty sure I watched like Wicker Man and Ghost Rider. I saw Knowing in the theater, I'm pretty sure, in high school. I was like, man, Nick Cage, something to do with like the planets being destroyed or the apocalypse or, and I was like, I was kind of like already a Nick Cage fan. And definitely this one came up to me in exactly one of those like YouTube videos back in the day of like Nick Cage best acting compilation, that kind of thing where you're like, and it's just vampires kiss clips and like clips from Con Air and clips from Snake Eyes, like that kind of thing. So I didn't know it, but I was being introduced to all of these amazing movies out of context. And I'm pretty sure that between that and watching Pulp Fiction, I finally went, okay, I need to watch whatever this movie is where Nick Cage was in a movie with John Travolta. Because like that's what it was for people. It was like Nick Cage, John Travolta. This was like, they were trying to advertise this as like Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, right? Two titans of the screen, head to head, face to face, and
swapping places.
Yeah, so that was when I finally decided to watch it. And same as both of you, I had no way of being prepared for what an insane, not just performances, like the screenplay is fucking bug nuts.
Oh, it's crazy.
And then obviously the directing. This was definitely the first John Woo movie I ever saw, and immediately fell in love with the intense, operatic, like just crazy controlled chaos destruction of it all. And
for me, the first thing that I recognized as John Woo, because again, I was just a child basically, was that moment that Nick Cage gets out of the car and his coat like just does a sharp flip into the wind, and they add
like it's like a little cape or something.
Yeah, and they add this like little sound effect, and it's so sharply edited. And I don't know if they were
like
just
flapping.
They got the perfect shot of it doing it, and it's like I just remember thinking this kind of style is the coolest thing in the world to me. This very over the top and it like almost almost cartoonish. Like, I don't want to call it cartoonish because that feels like I'm insulting John Woo, but it's so theatrical. It's operatic. I guess you already said it. Really, that is the word for it.
It's very exaggerated, and as a result, but like everybody's on board for it. Like, as a result, everyone together working in tandem created like one of the greatest curiosities basically in American action film history that only exists as this specific cocktail due to a myriad of like super specific situations that you'd have to get into. Like, it's a perplexing combination that like defies logic or sense when you actually start to break it down. Like, it's based on an insane science fiction melodrama spec script that is maybe the most extreme vision of the cop versus crook, like two sides of the same coin concept. Like, cop becomes a murderer, killer becomes, you know, something a little bit more honorable. Like, that kind of story basically ever put to screen, where, you know, like it's about an anti-terrorism agent who goes undercover as his arch enemy, and he actually has to have gruesome facial reconstruction surgery straight out of like John Frankenheimer's Seconds with Rock Hudson in order to kind of pull it off. But the script is co-written by one of the guys who wrote The Mask for Jim Carrey and Chuck Russell, and one of the guys who wrote Death Wish 5.
Oh my God.
Like, it's such a weird combination of like animated self-awareness, but also like that. Honestly, the Death Wish thing clarified something for me a little bit too, where I was like, someone who's like familiar with like old American genre movies and knows how to work in tropes and knows how to work in, you know, sort of like these archetypes that they're doing.
Yeah.
And both of them basically claimed that they were inspired by the James Cagney gangster film White Heat, which I think is about a guy who has to go undercover into a prison. So you have these guys who are like, we kind of have our massive sci-fi prison movie spec script, and apparently originally written, it was a little bit more futuristic, but it was coming off too expensive to the studios. It was like $120 million movie.
That's interesting you say that, because that's something I've always loved about the film, is that the tech that they use in this sense of like the face swapping and everything is incredibly sci-fi and futuristic, but then everything else is just your classic, you know, grounded 90s extravaganza.
Yeah, it's all the rest of the design is like just basically like near future or like near present, like that kind of deal.
Yeah.
And they did that literally just to drop like $20 or $40 million off the budget, essentially, because they wanted studios to get more interested. And also they wanted to get some of the actors they wanted interested, because when they wrote it, they say that they wanted Stallone and Schwarzenegger. That was the idea. And also I think Michael Douglas was attached at one point, and he wanted Johnny Depp or Harrison Ford or something. Yeah, Bruce Willis and Alec Baldwin were considered at one point, which would have been a weird pairing.
Baldwin and Willis is kind of fire, actually.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting to see.
Rob Cohen, who directed the first Fast and Furious movie, was also was attached to it at one point before leaving to go and do Dragonheart. So like, there's so many versions of this movie that almost existed due to, you know, the studio interest in the spec script and everything like that. But what really does make it is like a true once in a lifetime great idea of being like, well, no, it's John Travolta and Nick Cage. Like, they are two of the strangest American movie stars at the peak of their over the top, exaggerated experimenting that they were comfortable doing. John Travolta hot off Pulp Fiction and Broken Arrow with John Woo.
Oh yeah.
And Nick Cage just doing Leaving Las Vegas and The Rock, and obviously Con Air that we just mentioned. But, you know, and who both are so willing to take this ridiculous role-playing, performance-swapping premise of wearing each other's faces, like, completely seriously. Like, the level of effort on display in the performances, the way that they're tracking who's in which body and who's feeling what, it is the most actor exercise movie ever. Like, this is, I think, the most acting that has ever actually been done in a movie.
Yes,
and it makes their performances and their acting like a subject of the text itself, where they, you know, like, they have total command over their image and body. They're creating identities. They're having these crises. And apparently people, I read the production history, like oral history from some of the people who worked on the film, and they said it was the first time they had ever seen actors basically study each other like animals for like weeks in pre-production and prep. Like they were studying each other's cadences, their mannerisms, the way that they, say lines, the way that they move their face and their hand. And they were like, we're totally going to 100% live in each other's bodies and wear each other like skin suits. And it's so rare to see actors that committed and for it to match the material so well.
Yeah, and I guess like I was looking at John Travolta and Nick Cage interviews about the film itself, and both of them were on board as soon as they said it was John Woo and each other. Like they were both interested in working with Travolta and working with Cage, vice versa. And I think it's because they could easily recognize it. It's like we have distinct acting styles and little mannerisms that we're known for, and we can pick up on those things. And what I liked too about the kind of respect of each other's craft was they were asking each other permission throughout the entire production based on what they were about to do next. Because Cage, he's aware of what he's doing. Like people think that he's just this wild man, but he knows what he's doing when he's going over the top and all of that. So they'd actually have conversations about like, is this too much? Like, do you think that like this
am I
would
making
look good
fun of you or your style?
Yeah,
or
exactly. He's like, do you think that this is a mockery or do you think that this is true to what you would do? And I think that is why we see such an amazing two performances on screen, because it doesn't feel like mockery. It does feel like these two respect each other, but at the same time, we're watching Face Off, we're watching John Woo, so things are exaggerated and over the top. But I loved that respect of each other's craft that they were talking about there.
Yeah, and you can tell that there's such a respect of the script in the movie. The actors like play up the script so well. It's also an underrated supporting cast, I think, as well.
Joan Allen as
Joan Allen's
Eve,
great. Joan
Gina
Allen's
Gershon
great.
from Showgirls as Sasha.
Great. Also,
fucking Nick Cassavetes. I always forget that he's in this.
Cassavetes. Who's Cassatroy's brother?
Oh, Alessandro Nivola, and I'm trying to think of what I've seen him in. I guess I've seen him in You Were Never Really Here, Selma. He's in Jurassic Park 3. So there's a couple, but he is great.
He's also
too
He's also in the Sopranos movie.
Oh, okay, sweet.
I just watched him in that, The Many Saints of Newark, where he's playing Dickie.
Dickie Moltisanti, yes.
And he's fantastic, because I often forget about him, because obviously the main focus when it comes to performances is going to be Travolta and Cage, but he has some great line deliveries, and he plays this like weird kind of shy, eccentric brother of Castor. And just the way that he delivers lines is incredibly strange at times.
That little wave that he does, he almost acts like he's acting like Dr. Evil or something.
Yes, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah,
for sure.
he also, I like the interrogator scene when he's like drinking the Diet Coke or whatever too, like through the screen, and he's drinking it in like the weirdest way.
yeah, and so even when you get the short scenes between Castor and Pollux, like there's still some strange interactions. You don't just have to have Travolta and Cage. And then speaking on some of the more, what they're trying to do, the more, I guess, grounded performances, which is the Eve and the daughter, and I'm blanking on her name right now, the character.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Played by Dominic
They
Swain.
play it more of like that traditional, very melodramatic family stuff. They play it that way, but I like
because they have to react to the absurdity, right? Which is so perfect by the time they get involved in the final set piece. And like Jamie gets one of the greatest lines in the entire movie, which is, "Will somebody tell me what planet I'm on?"
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it's a sentiment you totally understand by the time you get to that section of the movie.
John Carroll Walsh as Guard Walton.
Oh yeah, the prison guard guy, Mr. Zodiac
the prison guard
himself.
guy who's like kind of sadistic. He's really good. He's really good. Yeah. I mean, even oh my God, the guy from The Wire is in it too. Bunny from The Wire is in this as well.
Oh right, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
CCH Pounder is in there
Thomas
too.
Jane. It is pretty wild.
It's a really stacked cast for sure.
Oh, and what I was going to say about the daughter, what I like about her is first of all, her arc is hilarious because they do this, like, she's not the classic American daughter that you have. She's got, she's rebelling. She has dyed hair and she's putting a ring in her nose and all of that. And she's fighting back against her family. And I love that the visual sense of the arc is that she goes from like punk weirdo, quote unquote, to just normal American average girl. And her performance is great because she's just playing up the whole like bratty teenager vibe. And I think that she's fully aware of what everyone else was doing because it is very played up. Eve is the one that kind of grounds the whole thing, but again, it's all melodramatic, so there's still some over the top qualities in that sense too.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and that's the Wu touch. Like, this is a really important aspect of this film, and I think a thing that gets underrated in the film when it gets talked about, because obviously there's insane acting, there's insane line deliveries and gestures, and we'll get into a lot of them. There's insane action sequences that are just incredible and visually impeccable to watch. But John Woo was actually always very annoyed that he was basically, to American audiences, he was considered just like a cheesy action guy. Like, that actually kind of pissed him off a little bit, especially too, because so many of his movies were getting cut up. And, this was the movie where, he did get the most amount of freedom he was given by an American studio. And that was because I believe that Travolta and Cage were like really invested in his vision and working with him and working with each other. And so like there was a reason for that. He was the most protected on this production. And also, this is one of his most financially successful films, if not his most financially successful film at the box office and everything. It's why he got Mission Impossible 2. Yeah. But the key to all of this is that John Woo, and you can even find interviews of him basically saying this, is that he is a drama guy. He believes entirely in the melodrama. He actually went to the writers and said, we need to write more character. Like, I see what you guys are going for, and I know how to exaggerate and play it up and actually capture it in the filmmaking. But like, I actually, want to get invested in the emotions that these characters would be going through, despite the absurdity of the situation. And that's why I think is something he's so perfect for. Because again, he is just a supernaturally gifted action filmmaker. We've talked about him, a lot of times, and specifically, he's already spent years, by the time he comes to make this film, honing this kind of operatic, kind of weepy cop crook, sort of like mirror image, opposites colliding romance action concept. Like, that's what The Killer is. We covered that. There's a little bit of that in Hard Boiled too. I'd say it's more in The Killer, especially in the finale. But like, he already had movies that were about, these male relationships under pressure and identity and performance and these codes of honor and these, really severe, gruesome transformations via the violent, ballets of action that he was going to put on. And here you could just see him gleefully delighting in the fact that he has found a way to literalize the transformation process. Like, it's not just like one character becomes more corrupted. It's like, no, one character in a literal sci-fi horror sequence becomes another character.
And it's the ultimate good versus evil swap. Like, you do have a little bit with Travolta where, he's not, he is, I wouldn't say it's a corruption. It's more just like he's hyper focused on this one case, which can make for some bad decisions in other parts of his life. But ultimately what he's trying to do is avenge someone that killed his, like 8-year-old son. So he is kind of represented as the ultimate good trying to take down the ultimate evil.
Though I do like the complications that are thrown in there, right? Because there is like there's this amazing element. We'll get into the specifics of it, but like broadly, there is this element of Cage as this is going to get confusing to talk about. We're going to need to do character names on this one. We're going to have to do
fake Cage and fake Travolta in my notes every once in a while.
We're going to have to do like Archer and Troy, and have to be basically like when Archer is in as the body Troy. Of Troy, Archer as Troy. When he actually needs to start going undercover into the criminal underworld, and he actually starts like befriending some of the people that he used to view as like just completely inhuman scum that needed to be fucking like put in jail. And there is an element where he actually starts to humanize with the criminals and actually starts to feel bad when they're getting massacred, and actually during the prison break, like actually tries to help criminals because he's like, wow, some of these criminals are being horribly mistreated by these guards. And, so there's a really interesting element where he kind of goes, wow, there is like a bit of a power corruption element to this. And on the flip side, when Troy as Archer becomes, goes undercover and starts pretending to be like the top cop, the top FBI anti-terrorism agent, he just like is like, imagine what that kind of person with that level of power could do. And weirdly enough, actually does start to try to make his home life like a little bit better in a way, because
he's active. So, like it's finally, at least he's present, even though he might be giving the daughter a couple questionable pieces of advice. He's active in the relationship, and he's
both use their skills in the opposing person's lifestyle, and it actually does have an interesting effect that actually does start to blend the good versus evil element a little bit that I kind of liked.
Yeah. I mean, like, low key, it's really funny when he like is talking to the daughter, and he's like, "Look, you dress like that, they're gonna treat you like that."
Right.
You dress like it's Halloween, you're gonna attract some ghouls.
I think he said something like you.
It's almost like Troy. It's almost like Castor Troy as or Travolta as Castor Troy. It's almost as if he feels bad, for like killing the son. When or not even feels bad, but almost like he's like, all right, I didn't mean for that to happen. So he's kind of sort of like, all right, let me like fix a little bit what's going on in his life.
Well, yeah, he's forced to go with his wife to the grave of their child and like hold her while she's grieving, which is such an emotionally perverse moment, because she's freaking out, being like, I can't believe our son was taken from us and our lives were entirely ruined and our marriage was strained. And she's sitting there holding and crying into the arms of the guy who killed her son. Without knowing that.
I can't, like, Travolta does amazing acting in that scene, like amazing face acting. You can't tell if he's just like, this kind of sucks, like, what am I doing here? Or if he's just like, maybe I shouldn't have killed the son. Like, his face is kind of just like, ah, shit, man, this is kind of like rough.
He's definitely like, it's not fun. Like, I'm used to being like a guy who just can go and do whatever, and I don't have to deal with the consequences of it. I just blow shit up.
Blow shit up, get his tongue sucked. He's just a rock star, basically.
Oh my God,
I mean,
the tongue
first 10
sucking.
minutes of this movie. The first 10 minutes of this movie, like, as when Cage is Troy, the first 10 minutes is just fucking 15 minutes or whatever. It's fucking unreal. Like,
it's genuinely breathtaking.
It's probably the
watching
best
just Cage like go as unhinged as you can.
What did he say when the opera's going on, when the choir is singing? What does he say to the girl? He's like, a 2-bit hack, like.
And he calls the Messiah fucking boring.
He's like, actually, I've always found this fucking boring, but when you sing it, a 2-big hack, like.
The whole, like, his introduction might be my favorite villain introduction ever of all time. Like, the amount of just layers that you have with it. First, you see him
killing his son too.
Oh, of course,
with the fucking mustache, killing his son.
Which, by the way, it's the Chow Yun-Fat mustache from The Killer. He also disguises himself within the mustache when he goes to do his assassination. So I was like, Nicolas Cage is paying homage to the King Chow Yun-Fat over in Hong Kong.
Yeah,
and he's like.
Before we get to I guess the priest introduction, like, I love the way that this is shot too, because it has that kind of like flashback, lighter filter to it a little bit. Like,
it's almost like a reverse negative type thing.
Yeah, a little bit. And of course you just have all of the wooisms, like when Nick Cage unveils the sniper rifle, and he does it almost like majestically, like he's like he puts it up in the air. He kind of has this like cool guy pose while he's smoking the cigarette and just aiming the sniper rifle. And then of course, like, this is where the religious aspect comes into it, because John Woo has so much religious iconography and symbolism in his movies, at least especially this one. I mean, it's just full of it.
The finale of The Killer takes place at the church too, right? The same as the finale in this with the funeral.
Yeah, absolutely. And they, like, even the tone setting in this is so serious, because you have this choir that happens a lot in the movie, and it gives this really like very religious feeling, very much like this is larger than life, something incredibly powerful is about to happen, and surely it does when you see an 8-year-old just get sniped in the chest. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, also collateraled through him, which is like the craziest detail in the whole thing. And like the kid's gory blood spraying all over the white ponies on the merry-go-round and everything.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
wild.
And then also Troy's face is like, what the fuck? His face is kind of like, yo, what just happened?
Yeah, he's like, that's the thing about Troy, is that he is pure evil, and when he does that and makes the mistake, there isn't like a sense of that he really cares, but there is a sense of like, ow, I didn't mean to do that.
That wasn't how that was supposed to go,
you know?
Yeah,
it's kind of the same way,
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same way that Travolta acts that out when it does get to that scene that you guys were talking about with him having to hold Eve. He has this mix of things where it's like, I just wish I wasn't here. You know, this sucks.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily feel guilty
yeah.
because, you know, I'm Castor Troy. Fuck him. But it does feel like...
He's like, why didn't you just get over it or kill yourself?
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking to him about, like, why didn't he just get over the death of his son that he shot through his chest and murdered in front of him as he's, like, crawling across the fucking playground grass.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And so after this introduction that you get, so you kind of have the idea of, you know, who Travolta is and why he's
You get the rivalry. You get, like, insanely, like, evil terrorist and FBI agent who's meant to be hunting him down, very like, you know, Heat style, like, you know, the master criminal and the master cop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it kind of introduces the idea that although Travolta is very good at his job, nobody likes him at his job because he's so serious and so sad and all of that. And it's kind of, honestly, it's almost a little funny just because what he went through is unbelievably tragic. And you'd think that these cops who would be either in the same line of work, have the same risks or whatever, would just be a little bit more empathetic. But they're so played like, oh, this fucking annoying guy that lost his son doesn't want any cake today. What a fucking asshole. Like, it's
I know it's
really funny.
It's
in
so
that way.
funny. And like Travolta as Troy is like when he comes into the office, everyone's just like, "Oh, look, new shot."
Yeah, that's what's hilarious too, is that that's a part of them liking him more when Troy actually starts to play as Travolta.
He's more fun to be around as like a presence in the immediate surroundings.
Yeah, exactly. He's
then like, our boss was fucking mopey about the death of his kid for fucking 6 years, and he was so fucking like obsessed about hunting this guy at like any cost. He got like it's implied that he got like 6 people on his team like killed trying to hunt down Troy for 6 years or something like that, waiting for a, you know, and what's his line too? We'll take a break when the case breaks.
Oh yeah. Which leads to another great moment where even after they, you know, get Castor the first time within the first 15 minutes in that hangar scene, which we'll get to, Travolta is just like because they're trying to celebrate him for the first time because they know that this is the case that he's been trying to close for so long. And they're like clapping and giving him champagne, and he's just like, oh, okay, yeah. You know what this is for? This is for all the dead people that helped me in this case. And then just starts naming off all the dead colleagues once again, like totally destroying the mood. And you get it. Like, I like that character moment because it's very true to like what Sean's character is and everything like that. But it does lead to these very
he is meant to be depicted as unhealthily obsessed with this specific event in his life, and that he does need to mourn and get catharsis, and you know, like the whole it is a movie about a guy obsessed with his job who makes his way back to his family eventually, right? Like that's the overall it's a thing that we've seen before a ton of times in movies. It's just never been so heightened to such a ridiculous degree that you end up, you know, like how that's expressed, because that's always been Woo's thing, right? Is his things are over the top and he has an indulgence and an absurdity to him, but it is always an expressiveness of the melodrama and the severity, like the maximalism and the tangibility of his action sequences are always with the character experiences in mind. They're a cathartic release for those characters. Like when we talked about in The Killer, like a guy just can't scream and sob about this loss of a friend. He needs to fire his gun 10 times into a room.
Yes.
And we need to see the muzzle flashes and the flying slow-mo debris of the destruction as if they are like an extension of his tears, the same way guns are an extension of fists in his action sequences. Like that's just his style, right? And so, yeah, having these sort of conventional, you know, I hesitate to use that word in this movie at all, but like sort of conventional ideas, emotional ideas for an American action movie, and for a cop and a criminal hunting each other down, cat and mouse sort of thriller. But just taken to these crazy, crazy extremes of, you know, Nicolas Cage planting a bomb at the LA Convention Center and being like, I'm about to unleash the biblical plague LA deserves.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
And headbanging.
And Hallelujah is playing, and like he's dressed as a
the
priest.
Crazy eyes and tongue work. Oh my God.
Oh yeah. And to really like just bring it home, he goes and you know, grabs the ass of what you assume is no more than an 18-year-old girl in a choir. And then John Woo decides to do this iconic zoom in of his face, this like upper crane zoom in shot of his face, basically giving like the most exaggerated O face you've ever seen in your life. While Hallelujah is still playing and the rest of the choir has yet to notice this priest make this move. It's just like, it's unbelievably incredible. And what I love, the thought going back to Travolta and Cage kind of talking about like how they're going to play each other and how they're going to play these characters. This is the opening, like, this is the real character opening of him, because we've seen him shoot, you know, the sun, but he's really just on a mount, like a hill, and shooting trying to shoot Travolta. There's not a lot of like character sense there. And then this is where you get to see all his eccentricism and just his mannerisms and how he's going to move. And I love to think that
I can
Travolta
eat a peach for hours.
Yeah, and I like to think that Travolta's just sitting there on the sidelines while he's shooting the scene, like, holy shit, I have to. Like, that's the kind of energy I'm going to have to bring now. Because whatever they set in place, that's what the next person is going to have to bring on. And so having this as your introduction is just like, holy fucking shit, what are we about to look at for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes? It's perfect.
Cage goes pedal to the metal on that whole airstrip set piece.
Yeah, man.
Like some of the most insane, diabolical line reads ever spoken by an actor.
Yeah. And what's crazy is that he's only this Troy guy for maybe 15 minutes, and people remember him as this character because in this time period he establishes who he is so well, and then the rest of it you're watching Travolta play him, and then, you know, don't get me wrong, Cage is kind of going in and out
that's
of it,
Travolta doing Cage. Like, Travolta is being possessed by Cage is how people interpret it when they watch it. They think about it after. That's still Cage acting to them.
Yes.
Whereas I think Travolta as Sean Archer, it's so subdued. I mean, and that's on purpose, but it's so subdued. And so it kind of gives Cage such an upper advantage, I think, in when people debate, you know, Travolta and Cage. I mean, when he licks first of all, the girl's music sheet drops, and that's like really so funny.
Yeah,
he licks her
She's
ear.
Stunned.
The ear licking every time it comes up in the movie, it's disturbing.
It's so disturbing. How about how he's singing it actually just came up on my screen on mute, where it's like he goes even he's like, but you saying this can make you fucking hack like Hankel seem like a fucking genius.
And starts to sing like over the top and out of key in front of everybody and everything like that. Like,
all of his bizarre details of like his goons coming up to him with his little box filled with his golden Berettas and his chiclets and his joints.
Dude. It's just like his little, like, that's such a great way to show his personality too. Just show like what would be in this little box that he uses every day that they're bringing for him.
Wu does amazing direction as well. Kind of like the slow screen, and I like the shot behind Cage that shows his big ass gun, the big fucking gun, the two big guns he has.
Oh yeah, like, when they take off the suit and it reveals the double golden plated pistols in the back. It's oh my god, it's crazy. Amazing. And he has all these like swoop dolly zooms and pans and shit. Like, it's just so over the top and stylized, and it's fantastic. And also, like, when Cage eventually gets to play a little bit of Troy, what's interesting about Cage is that he, like, Travolta just gets to play pure what Cage was doing, whereas Cage has to kind of draw the line between being Sean but then also transforming into Troy. So you get these strange kind of middle ground performance with him where sometimes he's Sean, sometimes he's Troy, and often he's doing it like 1 second after the other. Like, he'll start crying, but then start screaming and wooing, and then cry again. Like, it's just, I love that both of them were able to kind of take each other on, but it's not as simple as just swapping. Like, they are still understanding the context of what the character would be going through at that time as well.
Yeah, apparently the writers were also on set to remind them like who they were supposed to be and some stuff, because there was some examples of like they felt that Cage was going to Cage mode when he was meant to be Sean Archer, and they were like, dude, you got to tone it down a little bit, you know, like you gotta, you know, because there was I think they explicitly told him the one time he was okay to go as crazy as he wanted, even as supposed to be playing Archer, was when he does finally kill him at the very end, and he goes, die!
Oh yeah, because that actually feels like something that Sean is holding within himself. And so and
he finally unleashes. He truly becomes Castor Troy for a moment, and he's like, that kind of felt good to be Castor Troy. And you know, there was a context where it was appropriate to actually go Castor Troy mode.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that's kind of in Sean a little bit too. Like, he's so pent up the entire fucking time. Like, he's hyper focused on this case. He's not having sex with his wife. Like, this guy needs a release, and you finally get it when he. You know, we'll get to it, but when he does a magical kill to Castor.
Yeah, and think about all of the things that they have to do in order to get to that. Like, this whole movie is, you know, he does need to just take him down and kill him. But like the opening set piece, there's so much destruction in that set piece, and it is like he captures him. And I love that they're like, yeah, no, the movie's over. Like, we did it. Good job. The case is over. And it does play as if like the opening set piece is like the final set piece of anybody else's movie.
Yes.
Like you would.
This is the end of a film normally. Definitely.
It is. Like, it's so crazy how we pick up in and you know, Cage is like hijacking the plane, or he's pointing, he's like, you know, you guys are going to take this plane off regardless of if we're being chased by the cops. And I love that his line is, this is a big gun, fly the fucking plane.
Yeah,
you know, that's it. He's
this
like,
is a very big gun, fly the fucking plane.
Amazing. Yeah.
I also like the lady who turns out to be an FBI agent. I think he tells her like, I think he's just like, would you like to lick my tongue? Or like, would you like my tongue?
If I were to let you suck my tongue, would you be grateful?
And then she does it.
Yeah, and then it turned, and I was like, that's the most committed undercover FBI agent I've ever seen.
Yeah, she fully sucked on that tongue.
Also, Pollux is watching this the whole time, like, oh.
Yeah,
his brother's getting horny for it.
In the subtitles, it's so funny. I had the subtitles on.
I love Pollux and Cass's relationship. I actually think it's like one of the greatest relationships in the movie. It's
it's
you
great.
can tell they're so tight. They're like, and they're so different. Like,
yeah, their back and forth is hilarious. And it was so funny when I was watching it. I had the subtitles on, and in the subtitles, when it cut back to Pollock, it actually says moans as he's watching his brother just make out with this FBI agent. It's very funny. And then one of the best cutbacks of a villain killing anyone is when he shoots the girl in the back and like lets the body just like Wu directs it so it just ragdolls like under the wheels of the plane and everything like that. It's kind of wild.
So
and
crazy.
Then you cut back to Cage, and in slow motion too, just to exaggerate the facial expression, he kind of scrunches up his face and just shrugs his shoulders, and it's just like, I'm a bad little boy, like that kind of thing. It's fucking hilarious. And this is not even counting like just the amount of squib work that Wu includes, and specific squib work too. Like at a certain point, there's a squib shot that shoots off a dude's ear, and you just think like, oh, there's more Wu just stylizing some awesome shit. And later on, they use him as an example of how they like reformed his ears to convince Travolta to go under the surgery.
They 3D printed his ear again.
Yeah. So it's cool that all kind of connects to later things too in the plot itself. But then there's no shortage of sparks flying and slow motion dives. And
oh my god, Travolta
guns.
flying the helicopter right over top of the plane so the plane can't take off. Like what a crazy. Like it's obviously not Travolta because that's a fucking absurd stunt that they're pulling off. But like what a crazy stunt, firing pistols at the engine so that they eventually crash into the hangar. Mm-hmm. And the airplane into the hangar has some of the biggest slow motion sparks I've ever seen on camera, which then turns into the gunfight in the hangar with the squibs and obviously the iconic John Woo wire pulls. Like if a dude gets shot with a shotgun, he's launching across to the other side of the room as well as the blood flying towards the camera.
I also love go ahead, Josh, my bad.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and also, of course, the crazy diving, dual wielding, that goes down. The sudden inserts of sunglasses and reloads and gun smoke, and Cage landing on his shoulders while firing two guns at the same time. Like it's a classic Woo stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. I like another kind of Cage line reading that I love is in the beginning when he goes. He starts kind of crying. He's like, "Please don't kill me, police officer guy."
Yeah.
He's just suddenly just says like, "Well, you better do it because I don't give a fuck."
Because I don't care.
I'm ready for the big ride, baby. It's just like what's happening?
Yeah, what a crazy moment when they do meet like face to face and they both go, "Well, we each only have one bullet left." Oh man, like we're both like super smart. We count the bullets that we have left, and they're like dancing around each other in almost like this tango like yin yang like dance that they're doing, but they're perpetually locked in because technically, if you're looking at sort of the broader storytelling being done, like one needs the other one to kind of exist. And so Nick Cage is like, what would you do with me locked up? Like you wouldn't have a mission. You wouldn't have this, and then he uses all of that conversation as an excuse to, distract him so he can pull the trigger and he has no bullets left. And that's when he breaks out. He's like, okay, just fucking kill me. Get it over with, And
I love just the in sync quality to it, like you said, it's almost like a dance. Like they're pointing their guns at each other, and they even do this thing where they both step to the side and then change the side of the gun that they're pointing at, like from right to left.
It's like perfectly choreographed
at the same time. So they're just it's these people that are in sync. They're on opposite sides of good and evil, but they know each other so well. They know every single move, and it's such a great first 15 minutes of setting up a rivalry. I don't think anything else touches it in the sense of just how bombastic it is and how honestly true to the characters it is at the same time, even it being so ridiculous and operatic.
Oh my God. And obviously climaxing on Travolta kicking Cage into a jet engine that launches him across the room and puts him in a fucking coma. That's the climax of your opening like 15 minutes. And obviously, puts him in a coma, he captures him. And, it's like that doesn't solve all your problems, man. He's got so many problems that Archer has, with his wife Eve and his daughter. And I do like too that most of the sort of like domestic problems that he ends up happening are things that would be solved by just someone who is like more present and fun and animated and not like a mopey obsessed guy. And that's what makes it so like engaging when they do have to they have to establish this like actual straight up premise, which I gotta credit them. Like it's a long movie, it's almost 2.5 hours long. They go into it so fast that it's ridiculous. It's almost funny every time I watch it how fast they're like, well, he's in a coma and we didn't capture that bomb that he planted that's gonna like unleash a nerve gas across all of Los Angeles.
Super villain shit.
Would you be willing to chop your face off and put his face on your body and go undercover and find out and talk to like all of his goons and find out like all the things to do with this bomb?
It's the only plan that we could come up with.
It was the first plan and the last plan, and it's the one that's gonna do.
It's the one we landed on. Oh my God, that's so funny to think about.
Yeah, because and we meet like some of his goons. We meet like Gina Gershon from Showgirls and Demon Lover, who we've talked about recently, and Nick Cassavetes as her brother, who they're in this sort of incestuous like brother sister drug dealing duo connected to Castor Troy, and she also has a son that reminds him of his son, which is very important
for the finale.
Detail to it. Yes,
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Incredible decision.
Another great scene is Travolta as Troy versus Cage as Archer, like them meeting for the first time, and it's Archer's like in Cage as Archer's like in the prison, and it's like, you have a visitor, and out comes like Travolta as Troy, and it's like pure maniac shit.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're gonna be here for the next 100 years. Like, it's like,
it's so over the top. The like, see anything you like, showing his wedding ring and like saying that he's gonna fuck his wife. And to be honest, even the first way that he's introduced physically, where he's just kind of leaning on the wall as the door slides open, and Wu does these like fade zooms into his face, and he does, once again, it's kind of very similar to what he does on the plane when he does his little shoulder shrug, like, I'm just such a naughty boy. He looks at him and he kind of does this bashful like hit his nose with the paper that he's reading thing, like, uh-oh, look where I am, look what I did, like that kind of thing. The endless just the mirroring of that Travolta is able to do. And I gotta get like, I really gotta give it up for Travolta on the sense of him capturing obviously what he's doing as Troy, but even like little Cage mannerisms, like the breathiness that Cage has in some of his delivery, the cadence he matches perfectly. Like, this scene is where it is really introduced, of course. And Travolta fucking knocks it out of the park. Like it is. Well, yeah,
because I was like, prior to this, it is kind of the Cage movie, because because Cage got to do the crazy opening set piece, and then Travolta in a series of really crazy sequences where his FBI team, played by Robert Wisdom and CCH Pounder, they walk him through the he's in a coma, like he's like, oh, you're keeping him alive, god damn. He's like, relax, he's a turnip, he's putting the cigarette out on his leg and being like, he's planted the bomb in LA, we need to get you to switch with him, even though the wife is like awesome. The wife is like, don't go and re-up and do another job, man. That scar won't move, but it will heal if you let it. He's like, no, I got to double down. I got to do one last job. And the actual sequence itself of him actually having his face like lasered off and open and suctioned off, and the sound of it being like coming up, the goopy, gory, like prosthetic effect is so good. The full body recreations of the two actors is like insanely creepy and lifelike. And it also results in that scene too, where when Archer comes out the other side as Cage, and obviously his acting change up is like obviously really really well done, and Cage is now doing the stoicness and the teary eyes and doing a more kind of sensitive performance. But when the faceless Troy wakes up, and it's Cage in like a horror sequence, basically, where he's like ripping his mummy bandages off and touching his goopy face, and doing the primal Joker screeches, looking at Travolta's face underneath the spotlight, where he's like, someone took switch my, but it's cool. We're gonna deal with it, while he's like maniacally laughing his ass off, smoking with no face on. And that shot of the reflection in the glasses on the fucking like doctor while he's doing that and everything. It's almost out of like a Raimi movie or something. It's fucking crazy.
He's fucking incredible.
Yeah, and he has he adds almost a lisp while he's talking, because he knows that he wouldn't have any lips, like, because it's removed from his face. So he's got this like lispy quality to him when he's talking without the face at first. And yeah, like you said, he's got the shadow on the wall, like he's a horror movie villain. And it reminded me of that scene in Batman, actually, with Jack Nicholson, where he's just like, show me in the mirror or whatever, and then he smashes
give me the mirror.
it. Yeah, like that whole thing. So it's really cool that they channeled that for a little while. And the directing from John Woo in this moment is kind of horror-esque as well, when he does these, like, the whole movie is very violent, and he's willing to show whatever he needs to show. But I love that he chooses to do quick cuts of Nick Cage without the face instead of just showing it the entire time. He does this thing where he like starts clapping at the doctor because he's pulled off the operation. He's just like, brah, fucking vo, great job, like that whole thing. And as
they really want to send home like the gruesome sort of like the unnatural element that's being done here, not and obviously the ridiculousness of what's being done here. Like when they're trying to explain how they're gonna like shift his bone structure and like firm up his build and like ruin his hairline, modulate his voice, I'm like, did they do something to his dick? Like what? Like they did everything. Did
they match the peen? That's funny. Yeah, and I like that as he's clapping, they edit it so it goes from like the doctor to Nick Cage's face for a second, so you can just see how grotesque it looks. And then they end the scene with him fucking slowly walking up into the doctor's lens, and you see just all of the muscle and the blood and whatever in the lens, and he's still smoking the cigarette, and he's just like, what do you want? He's like, take a big fucking guess or something like that. Oh, it's a fantastic introduction to the rest of what we're gonna see. I also love just the whole like the tech that he involves with, like as they're doing the surgery and using like the laser to cut the skin and everything, they keep cutting back to like symmetry at 100% on the screens and stuff. And I just love that like old school way of looking at technology and like digital screens and stuff. So that's got some great quality to it too.
Yeah. But it's a really like well done, tangible way to kind of get the audience on like, involved in the actual premise that's been done before the actors finally get loose. Like, because when they eventually hit the prison stuff in the Erewhon prison, it is like, there's some stuff you have to believe in order to understand what the fuck is happening. When he's getting the giant magnet boots put on him that the fucking Goombas wear in the live action like Mario Brothers film from the 90s, and
which
the fucking Zodiac killer is like torturing him inside the fucking prison, and you get that transcendent moment, which was the part when I first watched the movie that I went, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, which is when Cage finally, for the very first time, who up to this point has been playing at Travolta. He's been sad. He's been like, oh my God, I'm going undercover. And he's been playing it as like the serious stoic cop who's talking to all of these criminals and getting into riots and fights with them and everything like that. And when he realizes that Pollax is watching him, and he's like, oh shit, I'm supposed to be playing like a character,
eccentric villain.
I'm Troy. And when you have to watch the brain process of Nicolas Cage be, I'm Nicolas Cage playing John Travolta, playing Nicolas Cage, or doing an impression of him.
Yeah.
And, so and when he puts on that,
he looks at Pollux at one point, like looks at Pollux and like he's getting his ass kicked. And like Pollux is like, why is my brother getting his ass kicked? And then like he looks at Pollux and then starts like, and then starts kicking ass.
The huge inhuman smile and just starts overacting and everything. It's incredible.
I think it's really cool too to have to like, he has this style that he's aware of where he goes over the top and all that, but to try to do it in a way that appears as if it's replicating it and not just being it is a very interesting thought, and I like that he has to
as if Nicolas Cage wasn't naturally doing it the way he normally would, right? Like he has to make it look like he's putting a concentrated effort into going Cage mode.
And he does that I think pretty well too, to the point where I think even when he goes almost more exaggerated than he would, I think that's almost saying, at least in the sense of like what Cage is thinking, I'm thinking that he's thinking that Sean would, when he's replicating it, would try to go maybe even more eccentric and over the top than the natural Troy would, just because Troy's doing it because that's who he is, whereas Sean is doing it because he's trying to put on a performance. So it's a cool thing to watch.
He's trying to get information out of the brother. He's being like, we're going to blow up LA, bro. Your bomb is a work of art that belongs in the Louvre. It's
awesome. And then this is where I mentioned it briefly, but where he's starting to, he's realizing that he's going to be in this prison environment for a long time. He's going to have to play Troy. He's going to have to convince Pollux. He's going to have to fight people all the time in this setting. where his character is shown as like crying because Sean's in there, but then he starts to do the maniacal wooing that Troy would do, and then going back to the crying. This is all in like a 3 or 4 second span that you're seeing him do this too. And it's of course it's a little silly, but it's so wildly entertaining, and the concept is so baked into the film. And the style and the choice of performances.
Oh, yeah.
It's like fucking
at a certain
unbelievable.
point, you just have to go with the fact that John Travolta as Nicolas Cage is going to walk into a room at one point and go, "It's like looking in a mirror, only not." Yeah.
And somehow selling that line, like, oh my fucking
amazing.
God.
I absolutely love when Travolta as Cage meets Eve for the first time and like literally starts flirting with her, and it's like, come on, Peach, why you leaving and stuff, and she's just like, who's this guy? She's like, Sean, wow.
yeah
Papa's got a brand new bag.
I hate to see you go, but I love to watch you leave.
Oh yeah, he's just laying lines on her and stuff. It's so funny.
I know.
And
Then he like gets the cigarette from the daughter's room, and it's like, things gonna be different around here. Papa's
That's
got
the
a
most
brand new
uncomfortable scene ever, when he's just like checking out her ass in her bedroom and being like, oh, you know, we got a little twist here, you know? Like,
yeah, and the implications of when
He's
he
like,
says
oh
something.
my God, maybe this is not gonna be too bad after all. Like,
Yeah, and the implications of when he goes up to her and you don't know he's reaching for the cigarettes, and he says something like, I just need to get something that I'm addicted to, or something like that. And you're like, it's obviously heavily implying a young woman, and then he just grabs the cigarettes. And once again, he is Travolta at this point. So this is a father-daughter situation. And it's just like we already said it, I think, earlier, but it is the most perverse familial shit like ever.
yeah, every
in an action
interaction
movie.
in all the home life stuff is so filled with so much bizarreness and perversion because of this dramatic irony of knowing that, you know, the sadistic killer that ruined their family is inside the body of their dad, and none of them know it,
and they're kind of enjoying it.
Despite how outlandishly he's behaving, because he just plays it like he never does the I'm pretending to be, you know, like Sean Archer, the same way that Cage doing Travolta actually does, basically just like straight up play, you know, he is actually trying to pretend to put on a performance every so often and actually be undercover. Like with Travolta's performance, he's just like no, I'm just playing this as Castor Troy's like swagged out self. He's just going to be like monstrously horny and disgusting in every possible situation that he gets in. And he's kind of like, you know what? It's pretty nice being a cop. You know, I kind of like it. You know, at one point he's convincing his brother to be like, show me where the bomb is, man. And we can disarm it and like save the day. And, you know, I'll have so much power, you know?
Yeah.
There's a look that Travolta as Troy gives Walton, the security guy, like when they first meet, when Travolta and Cage as each other first meet face to face, and Walton's like, I'm sorry about that, Agent Archer, and he's like, don't worry about it, Walton. Clearly he's had a traumatic childhood, and you know, and he, like, the face he makes is just like.
I love.
Meanwhile, Cage is being like restrained by like fucking corrupt security guards, and like his eyes are popping. He's like, clearly had a traumatic childhood, and thank you.
and I think that's when he chokes him and screams for the first time the die, that whole thing, before he gets to do it again in the finale.
I love how also
guys...
Troy hates the fucking suburbs. He's like, I may never get a hard on again. Look at this fucking place.
Yeah.
And he's just
and when he drives by his house and the wife, and he goes, oh, right. You know, I guess
he has to drive the car back.
He's like, sorry, all the houses look the fucking same, or something like that. Yeah. I have to recommend.
Yeah, he enjoys being a cop so much. It's hilarious, but while still going so hard in the Cage faces and poses and stuff like that. Like when he defuses the bomb and he comes back into the police station and they're all applauding him, and he's just like smiling like he's like accepting an
like
Oscar or something like that.
They have him on the fucking screen at the prison.
Oh yeah, and he's just like balls in my court now or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh no, he says like interception. We have possession now or something like that. So ridiculous.
Travolta's
so
going
funny.
so fucking crazy, man. And when he does that lick on Cage's face too, I lose my mind every time. When he's like, God, I miss that face.
Yeah.
And he just starts fucking licking him. Man.
I love his obsession that he plays with himself. Like, and it goes along not just with Troy as a character, but the whole John Travolta Nick Cage thing again, because they give Travolta lines like, man, I can't wait to get rid of this ridiculous chin, like that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Like his big butt chin that he's always been known for. So it's just like, I love that they incorporate that kind of stuff too. And I have to recommend this to anyone that hasn't seen it. You can go on YouTube and there's like a 5-minute behind the scenes cut of this scene where John Travolta is introduced as or Troy is introduced as Sean for the first time, and it's just getting the line deliveries from a behind the scenes camera, which is interesting enough, but then you get to see them after Wu yells cut and how they react to what they're doing. And Travolta, man, is fucking jumping up and down like a schoolboy. He's beaming from ear to ear. He is having so much fun with this like exaggerated craziness. And I think it's a cut right after Nick Cage chokes him and yells die, and then that's when they yell cut. And Cage is kind of like more laid back, where Travolta's excited, and he's just like, "Are you okay? Was that too tight? Should I lay back a little bit?" And Travolta's like, "No, man, that was awesome. Go harder if you want," like that kind of thing. So it's so fucking amazing to watch, and I would just have to, I highly have to recommend looking.
That's amazing. I mean, dude, like
you can see it in the performances. Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You can kind of see that both of them are so happy doing this, and it's really. I mean, it's really such like a fucking. It really is such a fucking special film to watch.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's even great when Cage as Archer comes back home and is trying to convince Eve that he's Archer.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah. He's
by
trying
telling
to convince
her like personal stories and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and she's just like, "What the fuck?" Yeah.
Yeah, it gets like, well, that's kind of, it's cool that that's perverse too, because then because once you're seeing the just physical Troy Caster, that is what you're seeing, and she's trying to process this whole thing, this whole crazy situation, and at the same time in that scene he's like bleeding because he's been shot, and they do this, we haven't even mentioned it yet, I don't know how we forgot, but the hand caress over the face that they do to signify that they're like part of the family.
Sean Archer's like creepy little like face wipe that he does on all of his family members' faces,
and
which is like his most like romantic gesture.
Right, and they use it as this thing that they recognize as like, oh, well, only our family knows that. And so when he does it, she's kind of like, oh my God, Sean, like that kind of thing. And I love how silly
it's the reverse, right, of the
is.
scene we were talking about earlier, when Travolta is the one who has to, hold on to the grieving wife, knowing that he killed her kid. The reverse is when the wife has to reckon with the fact that the body of her killer is now filled with her, of her family's killer, her son's killer, is now filled with all of the history of their family and the sensitive father and, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, they get to play the romantic perversity of this situation up to some pretty extreme degrees in both directions, while also still accentuating in the action too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have to mention it. We have to mention the two big set pieces in this are, the big one is the big prison break set piece.
Oh yeah,
which is incredible. It's very, very hard boiled in terms of the way that he's shooting the destruction. Like, it's amazing squibs and sparks and wire pulls, tons of papers flying and screens shattering, and that beat which is so John Woo, of him, Cage throwing the bottle of acid at the guards and then shooting it midair, slow motion, so it explodes all over them and stuff like that.
Incredible,
awesome.
Incredible shot.
That's just a detail that no one but John Woo would put in a movie.
Yeah, and of course it's
it's
that
an incredible
hyper stylized slow motion and everything like that. It's so fucking good.
Yeah, and I like too that it starts to show him developing some loyalty and friendship to the criminal associates, where he's actually helping them like lead a revolt against the abusive prison guards that they all they all suffer from, and not mistreating them. Because when I think there's one thing that Pollock says at one point where like, yeah, Castor Troy, the way that he treats all his criminal friends is he fucks their wives and sisters in a sandwich.
Yeah,
Meanwhile you have like Archer as Troy, who's actually like trying to save them and help them and protect them, and getting into that huge brief helicopter chase moment where Cage has to dive into the ocean, and the whirring like blades of the helicopter in slow-mo are going by him while he's landing in the water.
I love that realization too, that not only are we in this giant crazy super tech magnetic floor prison, but we're in the middle of the ocean, like it's an oil rig or something like that. Like this thing is so
the design of this world is so fucking ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. And I don't even think they show him I'm pretty sure he dives into the water, and then the next scene is just him like, yeah, I made it. Like we're back, baby. Because I'm pretty right. They don't show him like survive that swim or get to land or anything like that.
No, he just does it. Yeah, it just signals that he's broken out, and it's like a cat and mouse antics from here on out for the second half of the movie, where he's like, he's calling his wife and planting the seed that her husband is not her husband; it's actually a fake husband. I do love that line later when she whips out a gun on him, and she's like, "Where'd you get that gun?" He's like, "I took it from my fake husband."
Yeah,
it's just a great line.
Yeah, and I like that.
But also, you have Cage having to go into Castor Troy's base too, and finally doing his undercover thing when he's like, meeting Dietrich. And I love that when he meets all of his criminal friends, he uses the information that he has from when he's a cop, and he talks to them as if he's talking to like their criminal rap sheets. He's like, "Oh, hi Dietrich, you drug dealer,
Yeah. I also like that acceptance that he takes when he finally gets to land, and he calls Troy up as Sean, and he's just like, "If you're Sean Archer, I guess I'm Castor Troy." And there's just the whole setup of everything.
I can fuck with your life, brother.
Yeah, and I like that it's starting to unravel Troy a little bit, because he starts to kind of go back to what Sean was acting like in the beginning. Like he starts to yell at his colleagues and shit. Like a great line delivery, because it's not quite. It's still Travolta acting as in the Cage mannerisms, but he's unraveling. So he says something like, "It hasn't been recovered yet," and it's just like this over the top crazy reaction in the middle of the office and everything. This is where things start to get. Like, I mean, it's not even like it's like start. The whole thing has been fucking insane, but it just keeps escalating somehow. It's
the fact that it escalates until the movie basically ends is like an insane structure to maintain, and such an insane balancing act of tone and direction of just physical elements, and maintaining these performances through these situations as they're going on, because Cage is really
consistent.
Yeah, because Cage is really starting to lose his mind as, Sean Archer now having to play Castor Troy and going into his base and hanging out with his goons, and them being like, "Well, what are we going to do next, boss?" He's like, "We're going after Sean Archer." And they're like, "Well, I mean, his house is probably alarmed out like the wazoo, and, it's kind of dangerous, don't you?" He's like the FBI's guy, and he's like, "The code is 10/19/86. It's the date of his dead kid's birthday." And then he just starts like laughing his ass off, because he's like, the irony is he knows that information because he's the one who probably set that code.
He
and
knows
was in
Troy
mourning
better than anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that he has to basically play up how badly he wants to kill himself to these men, and they all start like gleefully, maniacally laughing along with him, while he's also like clearly emotionally tortured about all of this at the same time. I think that's also one of the scenes where he's like tearing up and crying and holding his face, and then jumping back into the crazy maniacal laughter that he knows he's supposed to do as like a cartoon terrorist, and all that kind of and it's also where the line, "Once we kidnap the super cop, then what? A little tiny surgery. I'd like to take his face off."
Yeah. Oh my God.
Throws his hands up into the air, which, by the way, I found out from the behind the scenes that Cage improvised this.
Oh, fuck
And everyone ran with it because they thought that it was really funny. And you can actually see, because I think I read it, it was in the production oral history. Nick Cassavetes is the one who was in the scene when he says this line. He's the one who said that was not scripted. It was a Cage moment. And he actually, you can see him kind of laughing at the line in the movie because he was like, what are you doing? Like, that's you just said the title of the movie. That's ridiculous. Like, what are we doing? You know, like he thought that, and then
Cage
so
knows
Nick
exactly
Cassavetes,
what he's doing.
yeah. And Cassavetes later in that scene being like, take his face off, like no more drugs for that guy. Yeah. Like all of that was like not scripted elements of the film. Basically they started calling it Face Off after that, basically, because it was already called Face Off. Like it was in the script. Yeah. It was called that, but no character actually said it. And as a result, characters started saying it.
Oh, it's
because of Cage.
It's so awesome. I love that like he must have. What I assume is that when he said it too, he probably said it spontaneously, and then Wu was like, "I need to capture that the right way," because isn't the shot this kind of like bird's eye view upper angle of it when he does it? It's like yeah, and that's so
it's such a perfect moment.
Oh, it's perfect. It's fucking awesome. And I also like that he makes a joke about like he's almost like you said he's trying to play like how much he hates himself in a sense, and he actually makes a pretty perverse joke about his he's fucking my wife, and he's telling them that as if like Troy is making a joke about Sean's wife is his because he owns everything or whatever, right? But in fact he is fucking his wife. So he's right. Like you see the pain in him as he's also saying it but trying to be the carefree eccentric supervillain. There's so many layers to this scene, and then you get some awesome wooisms where he pulls a gun out on himself in the bathroom mirror, and
one of my favorite moments in the whole film because he's tripping out on the drugs that Cassavetes gives him. He sees himself in the mirror and he fucking spooks himself because it's Castor Troy. He's just like, that's not what I fucking look like. He points his gun at him and he's like, and then he has to talk himself into it. He's like, I'm not me. I'm me. Yeah. I'm not me. I'm me. And when fucking Gina Gershon comes up behind him while he's making this face and doing the fucking smile in the mirror, what a fucking great moment.
Oh my God, it's incredible. And that's that thing again where I think, you would think that it's very crazy and ridiculous and over the top, but I think that is Sean again trying to replicate and capture that kind of eccentric thing that Troy is known for. And that's why it comes off as like really over the top. Like this is a smile that we have not seen throughout the entire film. He does a half version of it in the prison scene where he tries to convince Pollux, but this one is like he's just broken over the edge. He's completely shattered as a man at this point with this smile. It's great.
Well, because he's all alone. He's got to figure his way out of this, as best as he can, because everyone who knows about this undercover mission he was on was fucking, gruesomely torched to death by in that brief clip, that flashback that we see of that. And also, he's dealing with the emotional elements of finding out that like Gershon's character Sasha is like sort of in a relationship with Castor Troy, and her son Adam is actually Troy's kid. And there is actually that really creepy moment where he creates the face thing that he did with his own son Michael, and he does it on Adam, and he just starts holding him and crying and being like, Michael, right before
and Gina's like, what the hell is going on here?
She's like, what the fuck was that? Right before the headquarters gets raided.
Oh, and that's a explosive scene. It's fucking crazy. And to have the like 10-year-old child in the middle of all that chaos, and they really use that well too. I love when they put headphones over him as if that's gonna help the rest of what's going on.
And he's listening to Somewhere Over the Rainbow just while like a bloodbath of bullet mayhem just like goes, all around him, just bodies being torn apart and launched into the sky. And
it's crazy. And it's cool too because the entire penthouse is essentially made of glass. So it helps in the fact that you just see like things shatter over and over again.
It's just shattering everywhere while Nick Cassavetes is screaming, I hate cops. Yeah. They're like cockroaches.
Oh yeah, it's so fun.
Entire rooms being detonated by machine gun fire.
Nick Cage diving and saving the child from I don't know if it's like a falling if it's a falling piece of like furniture of some kind or chandelier. I can't remember, but he dives. He grabs the kid and dives him out of the way. It's pretty epic.
Well, yeah, and this is what I was referring to as well about like the line between the good guys and the bad guys being, you know, starting to become a little bit more confused, because this is like Archer as Troy. You know, you kind of want him to prevail in this like FBI agent massacre where they're just kind of like trying to kill them all and they're trying to shoot back. And you know, it's just a completely faceless force, sort of like what I was saying in Con Air before, where you're kind of cheer for the criminals a little bit because you're more familiar with their faces.
Yeah.
But it all leads to this amazing moment where, like, you know, like Archer is incredibly ruthless and willing to kill his friends and family as, you know, as the undercover, as the corrupt cop. And he does kill Nick Cassavetes in that crazy moment where him and Gina Gershon kiss as brother and sister, which is crazy. And then he stops holding the wound on his neck and he starts literally leaking blood everywhere and stuff like that. And we are briefly kind of meant to feel sad a little bit for like kind of like a fallen comrade, even though we know that this guy is like a horrible criminal. And then all of the, you know, FBI agents that they've been shooting, there's that moment when he actually takes the face mask off one of them that he's about to kill, and he realizes it's like one of his friends. Yeah. And he's just like, and then he has to like actually just like knock him out instead and be like, oh God, you know, I almost did that. And so like there's this amazing moment where like the identities are really starting to blur and break down between the two of them. And it is actually, you know, it's starting to collapse, this collision, and how much long can they maintain these performances in these lifestyles that they clearly aren't meant for, which is what's kind of summed up in that interaction. And when they're back to backs and symmetrical against the wall separating them with both holding guns, which is like, one of the most iconic shots in the movie. And Travolta being like, and Travolta being like, I don't know what I hate wearing worse, your face or your body. I mean, I enjoy boning your wife, but let's face it, you know, we both like it better the other way. Yes. So why don't we trade back? And Sean, what does he say? He's like, we can't do that now.
Yeah. Sean says something. It's kind of, I think it's kind of generic anyway, so it doesn't matter that much, but it's like something like we can't do that now, like we have to take this to the end or something, and then he responds with, oh well, plan B, let's just kill each other.
Yeah, and it's such a great delivery. It's
like the premise of the movie basically right there. They're just like, well, we know what we really have to deliver to the audience, so let's just kill each other. And it's I love that. It feels like a direct commentary on the film that you're watching at that very moment. And then you get the fucking awesome shot of them looking at the reflections, so they're actually seeing the physical form of what they're trying to kill, but it's just them. Yeah. And then they shoot through it. Like, it's just, oh my God, that's art.
What an image.
It's so great. And then it's kind of it shows further the ruthlessness of Troy too, because they kind of start this big shootout and it turns into a little bit of a chase thing with Pollux as well. And he ends up falling through this like big open glass ceiling. And it's the first time that you really see Troy as Sean kind of emote in any way, shape, or form. Like, you can see that there's a bit of a swell in his eyes, and for the first time you're seeing him lose something that at least meant something to him, because I think his brother is really shown as the only connection that he has whatsoever with humanity. And I love that they have this,
and that
this
cop
aimless,
coming in.
Yeah, this aimless cop that just has, you know, no name or no lines throughout the rest of the movie. It's just like, what do you care, man? It's just Pollux Troy, shot dead. Like, doesn't even say a word. It's just it's awesome. It's such an epic scale.
God, yeah. What a goddamn scene, and all of the John Woo, again, like poetry of the imagery with the reflections and the mirrors and the pure destruction and the little, you know, gunfight that they're doing, and again, he's so good at capturing in sort of like a very physical, tangible way the inner turmoil and crises that these actors are are going through with these characters, and the way that he just hones in on that is so. Like it is really what ends up selling this movie and selling, like some of the incredible scenes, like him sneaking back into his bedroom with his wife and being like, honey, don't look at my voice and, or don't look at my face and don't listen to my voice. But I'm Sean, I didn't kill our son. I took his face and he killed everyone who knew about our mission and, and transformed into me,
And there's further
I also
comments.
think it's.
Oh, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, go
My
ahead,
bad.
Jason.
I also thought it was really funny when Travolta as Troy wakes up and like him and like 3 other goons are just like walking really fucking aggressively in the hospital, like looking for her.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then he does like he tries to play it off like the smooth thing that he's been doing the whole time, where he's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I just get so jealous. And you can tell that she's, well, at this point she's been kind of briefed on what's going on, so she's uncomfortable. But
well, yeah, because he's like, have you checked your husband's blood type recently? Because, I'm, that your husband is blood type O, and that Troy's blood type is blood type AB. And if there's maybe there's a little doubt in your mind, maybe you should, when he's sleeping, give him a little, prick and go into the hospital and go check that out. Make sure that you haven't been sleeping every night next to your tormentor
killer.
And your son's killer,
Yeah, and I also really like that when Cage is delivering this information to Eve for the first time as Sean, he. And I would assume that it's in the script, because I think the script was probably pretty aware of how crazy this whole thing is. But I like that he's delivering lines like, as he's explaining it in the middle of it, he'll interrupt himself and be like, it's fucking insane. Like he's just he can't even hold it together while he's explaining the situation to the character. It's brilliant. And of course you get some awesome Cageisms too, where he's just like, they gave me his face, and like it just goes crazy with the face line and stuff. But I do think he's pretty tasteful in these moments, because again, it's Sean kind of losing his mind and losing his way and getting a little bit too mixed up with the Troy personality. So I think it works. But yeah, I love the commentary on just how insane the situation is.
Yeah, well, and Joan Allen does incredible work in that scene when, she has figured out that her husband is not her husband, but she still can't believe the sight of, like Nicolas Cage as Sean in front of her. She can't believe it, even though, he's doing the little like face touch to her, and he's relaying the story of their first date, and the complex emotion she has to reckon with on her face, listening to her husband talk about this like romantic monologue, and it's just coming out of the mouth of the most evil man alive right in front of her. Yeah. Like it's just like Joan Allen also has to take that like 100% emotionally seriously. It's really impressive, actually.
Yeah, she even has a line, I think it's a little later after this scene, where he comes back. I think it's at the hospital, and she's like, I don't trust anyone right now, regardless of the fact that I kind of like, I know that something's going on, and you're not actually Troy. You seem to be my husband in his skin, but this is such a fucking batshit insane scenario that I'm just gonna point the gun anyway and not trust anyone until I totally know. So yeah, I think her reaction to it is very good and very genuine.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, Joan Allen does some really good work in this,
because she has to play the most grounded character, really.
Yeah, throughout it all.
That's hard in something like this.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Cassavetes must have liked working with her, because she would come back for The Notebook.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot about that.
Yeah, but no, I've always liked her ever since Manhunter. I think was the first time that I saw her. She's very good.
Yeah, she's great.
And the way that the entire family does actually get incorporated into the big like beach funeral finale, which is kind of like the big final gesture of the movie, when Travolta, as Troy definitely knows that something's up. I think he has that funny line where he's like, lies and distrust. It's almost like a real marriage.
Yeah.
And this beach finale is just one of the greatest action sequences of the 90s. It is like,
and starting it in a
starts
Catholic
off,
church is just incredible.
Of course, in Wu fashion, the moody church hymns, the candles, the doves. There's an incredible story where apparently actually one of the producers on the films actually told Wu that he could not have his doves.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, but apparently he just like he just in sadness kind of like resigned his head, and for the rest of the shoot day just kind of like looked like a little sad. And the producer told him the next day that he could have his doves, and he just like lit up, you know.
I love that it's just like a sad acceptance until they saw how heartbroken he was. Like, Jesus, we gotta give this guy his doves, man. This is like, I've never seen him like this before.
Yeah, but they also, the producer said it was also just because he was such a perfectionist with some of the framing and the coverage that he was
why
like,
would you take that away anyway? Like, he's so good at
yeah, but
implementing
they basically said, we'll give you the doves, but there's no wasting film waiting for the doves to do like the perfect formation or the perfect thing. Like none of that. Like you can just use the doves. Okay.
Well, he still got it. He still captured it, I think, for sure.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that there's so much nuggets to talk about in relation to this movie kind of proves how great it is.
Yes.
It's
every scene is like, you can
I
just
know. Every
describe
scene
it.
has like a set piece. It's also like such like a well technically made movie on top of the actors being so much fun. It's really, I mean, it's just perfect. Like, isn't this religious? It really is, bro. Like,
yes, the eternal battle between good and evil, saints and sinners. But you're still not having any fun.
Oh, it's
also
so good.
like Cage barefoot skiing on the fucking water at the end.
Yeah.
Fucking that was probably the most mind-melting moment the first time that I ever saw it. When I went, the fact that they do a speedboat chase and John Travolta punches Nick Cage off the boat, and Nick Cage grabs onto a chain so that he doesn't, completely go into the water, and actually does a full like on his butt twist so that he can get onto his feet and start barefoot skiing. Like, it's like
the stunt itself is insane. Like, that guy is ragdolling when he is holding onto the chain. Whoever that stuntman was, it looked like he went through
even
some
the guys
shit.
Even the guys just crashing the boats into each other. Like, they are full on slamming those boats. Apparently, it's actually one of the earliest sequences that they shot for the film. And they say that in the first week of the film that they sunk a boat.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. You're right. When you see them clash those boats in that one like heli shot that they have of it, it is just full speed. Like, they're not trying to do any type of trickery or anything like that. It just looks like two speedboats clashing into each other. It's absolutely insane.
And incredible helicopter wide shots of them really slamming into each other, using the cop boat as a ramp and literally exploding their way through it while they're like the actors and the boat is like catching on fire. Just like really unbelievable stunt work there, and also just really great, sort of like visual connectivity between the sequences. Like, even something as simple as right before the boat chase, the little like Mexican standoff that they all have.
Yeah, and there's two of them, which is great. There's the one in the church where he does all these like close-ups of the gun barrels and stuff as they're going off, and then the second one is with the daughter. And you get these like great lines of John Travolta like finally shows her that he's the evil one and puts the gun to her head. And instead of her saying it, he just mocks her and he's just like, "Dad, put the gun down." It's the funniest fucking line delivery ever. And Travolta is once again just having an absolute blast. But yeah, these two standoffs are awesome.
Well, yeah, because it's just like the Leone close-ups on the eyes, the cartoonish number of people who enter the rooms with guns, and the huge like steady cam lurches to like reveal another one where it's like one of his goons come in, one of Sasha comes in with a gun,
to the point where Gina even says like, "I'm bored. Put the fucking guns down," or something like that.
Yeah, this is too many. And also, one of my favorite moments in the entire thing is, because you were mentioning, Travolta taking the daughter hostage, but briefly when Jamie doesn't know which one to shoot, and she's like, and they're like, shoot him, and she does finally actually shoot Cage, who is her actual father, and then she gets taken hostage, and when Travolta as Troy licks her and calls her peaches, and she's like crying her eyes out.
Oh man.
and she whips out the butterfly knife, shoves it into his leg and fucking twists it, because earlier in the film, Troy, as pretending to be her dad, gave her the butterfly knife to fend off
saving her
like,
from a rapist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Danny Masterson.
A little
I was gonna say
real life foreshadowing right there.
Yeah. I did not remember that until I rewatched this. But yeah. But king of parenting, when he's like, just shove the blade in and fucking twist so it they can't take it out.
Yeah. Oh man.
And the fact that it comes back in the finale so well there right before the speedboat chase. Yeah.
That's what you get for being father of the year there, Troy.
Yeah, and will someone please tell me what planet I'm on? As all of a sudden the boats are just fucking going fucking crazy, and they're crashing into the dock. And I think the last thing we haven't hit is that when they both crash the boat while they're fighting on it together, and they launch from it like cannonballs, and the boat is like flipping and exploding behind them while they're still in the air, and eventually like ragdoll along the surface of the water. I don't know who did those stunts, but those guys are fucking insane.
They're insane. Yeah, that it literally looks like they're just being mangled by water. It's crazy. I don't know how they did what they did. And you see, what's wild too is you don't see you'd think that there'd be like the shot where he's kind of ragdolling on the side of the boat, and then they cut away to maybe another action thing, and then cut back to him doing the water skiing. But you actually see the stuntman go from ragdoll to the water ski moment, and it's like it's a really impressive stunt. Yeah.
The big final confrontation between Cage and Travolta, slamming each other with pipes. The harpoon gun is coming out.
Oh man, that's it. That's the only way. You gotta learn to avenge your son through the power of a harpoon kill. That's the lesson learned.
You're right,
here.
Sean. I misbehaved. I have to be punished. But remember, every time when you look in the mirror, you'll see my face. And he starts like slicing up his own face, trying to like fuck with his own body. Like that's such a great, again, physical expression of like the identity crisis that's happening between these two men, when he's literally trying to like cut the face off and ruin his face for him, ruin his life, until he harpoons him in the gut. And in a stroke of genius detail, Travolta wriggles like a fucking fish dying on the harpoon.
Yes, and starts to sing like Troy.
Ready for the big ride, baby.
Yeah, ready for the big ride, baby.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Oh my god, he's like mumbling as his blood comes out of his mouth and shit. Like he just can't stop, even as he's going on his way to hell.
Yeah.
And of course, I love too just these small details. He takes the wedding ring back from the dead body. He tells the doctor when he's about to go under the knife again that he doesn't need the scar anymore.
I don't need my old scar anymore.
I just won't need it anymore. I'm over it.
The big romantic embrace with the overexposed sunlight of the family, but the perversity of them all embracing, but us still having the image of what the dad was just doing over the last couple days.
Totally. And I love
like somewhere deep down that image is still in there.
Yeah. And again that over sentimentality goes into the style. Like you said, it's this big overlit thing. I love that Travolta kind of comes into the door frame rather than just being there when it opens, and I love the slow reveal, and then they just keep piling things on top of another. You don't think it could get any more like overly sentimental and ridiculous or whatever, but then he's like, oh, also, now that my family is all back to normal, I also adopted Troy Caster's young son here, and he's gonna be your brother, and you're gonna embrace it fully with no questions asked.
Yeah, because Gina Gershon, when she gets shot in the giant altercation of gunfights of bullets and doves and explosions and everything, she goes, you need to raise our son and make sure, he doesn't end up like us. He's kind of giving the emotional, relief to everyone. And what's so funny about this moment is that so many people claimed that this was probably had to have been like a studio note or something to have such like a romantic happy ending. This is actually the way that it was written. This is the way that John Woo said he wanted. He said this is how he wanted to do it, and he actually like kind of fought the studio to try to keep the ending, but they were told that they weren't allowed to shoot it. and that this wasn't how it was going to end. According to the writer, the producer said it was a too European ending, and that American audiences would not accept the really perverse idea that like the bad seed of the child of his mortal enemy is being brought into the home as like a surrogate child for the one that was killed. Like they're like, that's such a creepy idea to try to sell romantically. But apparently they did test screenings without this ending, and 70% of the audience
like what happened
said
to the kid?
what happened to the little boy.
You motherfucker.
Yep. So once that happened, they were like, the studios came back and said, okay, you guys can shoot it.
Oh dude, that's so funny, man.
That's
incredible. My god.
So,
man, that's fucking
and then they just embrace, they kiss, you know, he finally gets that moment with Eve. It swells up, the music crescendo.
Also, I also love how Jamie does not have any piercings anymore. Jamie's like a regular girl now again.
That's right. She's normal. She's not some weird freak.
Well, yeah, I mean, because she was technically trying to do what the dads were doing a little bit, right? You know, she was changing the way that she looked and acted, and right. You know, you don't
dress like it's Halloween, you're gonna attract ghouls.
Yeah.
I also love how he like teaches her the knife trick. It's like, why are you doing this?
It's so it coming back to haunt him is just
it's funny, but it's almost kind of like it's almost kind of like I'm in your house, so I might as well just do something. Like,
like it is great that all these ironic setups, just every single one of them is answered by the end of the film. Like the knife thing, this taking care of the surrogate son now, like it just every single thing that they set up, even if you think it's this minor silly character detail that isn't going to be wrapped up in any way or even needs to be, he just does anyway. And
I'm also surprised with what we know about Archer, why he actually takes the son.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't he be like, oh, you're Castra's blood?
Yeah. I guess that's supposed to be his character arc, where it's like, he got over it so much that now he's willing to move on and share, put that love and focus it on a child, even if it's his mortal enemies.
And I was gonna say part of it too was like he started to humanize and relate to some of the criminals that when he was hanging out with Castor Troy, being like, yeah, I guess as kind of like the super cop who put these guys in jail or exploded them, I didn't actually consider that some of them are people,
and they
like
might
the
have families.
Gina Gershon character.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there is meant to be a little bit of like a, you know, he's become less of the obsessive, crazy, destructive cop by the end. I think is meant to be the idea that he's like, there's more grace here, you know?
Yeah. And that's the masterpiece Face Off.
That is Face Off, and this has been a long episode, so we are going to wrap it up in the reductive rating round here. But this is obviously like one of the easiest fives that I could possibly give, and most of my points will just be reiterating. But again, you have multiple things working here. Once in a lifetime, great idea. Combining two of these actors at the peak of their craft, giving them a legitimately deranged sci-fi melodrama spec script where they get to literally wear each other like fucking skin suits and role play, performance swap, and in a very graceful, choreographed, like dance like quality to it, where they actually are mimicking cadences and mannerisms and doing so. Yeah, and doing so in the name of the actual identity crisis and performance image creation, sort of themes that are actually baked into the ridiculous text of the plot even and everything. And, taking all of that and giving it to one of the most supernaturally gifted action filmmakers of all time, who had already been familiar with operatic cop and criminal mirror image kind of storytelling, and who just was, with this specific rivalry, was able to realize it in the most like gruesome, literal, perverse, opposites colliding, romantic action melodrama fashion possible. And it is like just one of the craziest transformation films I've ever seen, on an acting level, on a craft level, on a writing level. And yeah, there's so much pageantry. It's such an absurd situation taken so emotionally seriously by so many of the actors and by Woo that I can't. What else can you say? It's just one of the greatest movies that's ever been made, and definitely one of the best action movies of the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I saw this movie for the second time with the homie Eddie, who's a friend of the podcast as well.
Hell yeah! Shout out to Eddie.
And man, we had a ball. Like, it was so much fun. Like, we got Chinese before, and then we saw it, and then we got drinks after. It was just so much fun. It's just an electric movie. I love What a Predicament. That when Travolta says, like, what a predicament, it's just like the Mexican standoff. It's so weird. Like,
there's probably lines that we missed. There's too many good lines per minute.
Oh, like my God, line. It's so good. Every line is just it's incredible. How about when he kills like Victor, the boss, and he's just like Victor's having a heart attack.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
and he's like, I am Castor Troy, kabang.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like it's just really it's really a 5-star classic. It's a masterpiece. It's a movie that I recommend to people all the time. I'm like, bro, like you gotta see this movie. And it cements Cage for me as one of the greatest lead actors ever. He's a top 20 lead actor for me. I mean, he's just like, at his best, he's so interesting. I think it was Ethan Hawke who said that he thought that Cage took acting from a naturalism thing to a like performance thing, to a kind of populist performance thing. And I think that's absolutely true. And he's kind of one of those people. That he's just so unbelievable at it, and
totally agree.
Sean Penn said in the New York Times one time that Cage isn't acting; he's doing a performance, and that's to me that's the best. Like I'm not a capital A acting kind of guy; I'm a performance guy. Give me a performance, and Cage really does that. To me, it's up there with my favorite, just like pure id performances. It's like this, Denzel in Training Day, like Pacino in Heat. It's like that kind of just like screaming and that kind of just like maniac performances. I love it. It's just like that's the sick. Like I fucking, it's just my shit. You know what I mean? And this is everything, man.
Yeah, and it totally serves the cat and mouse, like, international action chase maximalism of the story and the crazy severity of the melodrama and everything that Woo is also heightening. This is definitely my favorite Cage performance outside of probably, I don't know, like Bringing Out the Dead, I guess, which is a very different kind of performance for him and is more, more in the Schrader Scorsese mold. But in terms of, like, being merged with a filmmaker, I would have liked to have seen Woo and Cage flex this a little bit more, because Woo was so willing to take a cartoon sensibility to the American genre film, and Cage was just so willing to go to that place with him in a way that other actors probably wouldn't have been comfortable doing.
Yeah, you can tell that Cage understands Woo like no one else. Travolta as well. I mean, both of them knew exactly what they were getting into when they signed up with Woo. And I would recommend, aside from that behind the scenes that I told you guys about, also would recommend the individual interviews that they gave both Nick Cage about the characters and Travolta. And it's just interesting to see both of their perspectives on it. And Cage, you can tell, had a real interest in playing this kind of double-sided character, and really wanted to bring that kind of like operatic theatrical aspect to it. So it's very clear that they understood exactly what they were doing. And they, between Woo, Cage, and Travolta, just they had a vision, and it comes together so well, and so rarely do you see something, especially as ridiculous as this, come together so cohesively. It's incoherently. It's crazy. So yeah, this is a 5-star easy for me. This is probably the best movie ever made, honestly. Like I think that this thing is,
it might be Face Off versus Heat.
Yeah. Oh, that would be that's a heavy contender for sure. Like I would say most days of the year I would consider this my favorite film, and that's hard for me to do, is say something is my favorite. But this just has everything I love about movies, everything, including over the top sentimentality. Seriously. Sorry.
No, yeah, me too. I mean, it's like literally it has everything you want.
Yeah, exactly. It's got that kind of like over the top sentimentality that you'd get from a big blockbuster, but then it's incredibly mean spirited and gritty, but then silly at the same time. Everyone in all aspects of the performances, not just including Cage and Travolta, have an understanding of what they're doing, and the lines in itself in the scripts are included, like having such self-awareness by saying multiple times things like, what planet am I on? This is fucking insane, as characters are explaining the scenario to other characters.
It's the only way to make sense of like the irrational symphony that Wu is orchestrating around them is to like have the actors themselves react to it. The characters themselves be like, what the fuck is happening?
It would seem out of place if they didn't realize the type of situation that they're in. That's how extreme and crazy this shit is. So I love that it points to that. And I think one of my earlier reviews, I was just like, because I liked this. The Holy Trinity is no longer the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It is now forever, will be John Woo, John Travolta, and Nick Cage. God bless them. And may you all shoot your gold-plated dual-wielding pistols with accuracy and style. Amen. It's one of the best. It might be the best action movie ever made. So, 5 out of 5.
Hell yeah. Well, that will, I think, wrap it up for this supersized episode of Sleazoids here. That was Con Air from 1997 and Face Off from 1997. Thanks so much, Jayson, for joining us and for going crazy long with us.
We kind
of knew, and we kind of talked about it a little bit beforehand. We were like, you got to know what you're getting into. You're bringing on Jamie's favorite movie of all time.
I brought it up a week ago when Josh mentioned that Jayson was coming on. I was like, you got to warn him that this is probably going to be a 3-hour episode, because these are heavy hitters right here.
No, I mean, this has been great. It's been so much fun. I love both of these movies, and I had actually emailed Jamie like 10 minutes before we were going on, and just like, dude, I'm so fucking excited. Bro, like this shit was lit, man. Like it was really great. We love the movies, brothers. We love the movies.
Yes, we do.
That's right.
We really love
cinema. Do you got anything going on in Jayson world you want to plug while you're here? I know you're not on. I know you're not on Twitter anymore.
Not on Twitter anymore. Bro, Elon Musk, this guy's a piece of shit. Like honestly, like I tried. It was my fault. I had an account that I was finally getting going, and then I tried to change it. I recently I've gone through a breakup. I'm fine, but I went through a breakup. I broke. Me and my girlfriend, we broke up, or my now ex, we broke up, and then I moved back to the Bronx. So I didn't want to have my @name as LES, Lower East Side Buf, and so I changed it to J Buf, and then they sniped me again because they realized it was me. And it's just like, man, just let me have the account, man. Like, so I decided I'm off Twitter. I'm just off. Fuck it. I can't spend too much energy.
So if anyone's interested in Jayson's writing, I think you got to go to his Instagram for the time.
Got to go to the Instagram. Yeah, @JAYBUF @JBuf. I do stuff for Rolling Stone, Stereo Gun, Pitchfork, GQ. I mean, you name it. I write. You pay me, I write. That's my role. And I got something coming up on O3 Greedo, a really great Los Angeles rapper for Rolling Stone. So yeah. So I got.
Look out for it. Yeah. Do it up. For our listeners, we are going to be back in 1 week's time, where there is a new Christopher Nolan movie on the way called Oppenheimer, about the creation of the nuclear bomb. And we actually realized that there are some big heavy hitter kind of canon movies about this subject that have already been made that we haven't talked about yet on this show. There were a couple that we were flirting with. Failsafe was one of them, but we ultimately went with, obviously, Dr. Strangelove, Stanley Kubrick.
So good.
So we're going to be talking about that next week over on the Patreon, alongside we wanted to kind of, because that was kind of like the comedic farcical side. We wanted to go a little bit over to the gruesome side because Nolan kind of keeps hyping up that this is like kind of like got a darker element for him. And I know that it is like rated R for him. So I'm curious, why exactly that is. We'll
Dude, I can't wait for Oppenheimer. I'm actually really curious about it. Like, yeah.
Like us too.
I wasn't at first, and then now it's kind of picking up, and I'm kind of seeing different trailers, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're going to do Doctor Strangelove, but that's why we're also going to be pairing it with Threads, which is a film that is like sort of a docudrama that is half, from what I understand, like a recreation of what a nuclear holocaust might actually look like if it were to take place. So I've heard that it is like a ruin your day classic kind of movie.
Can't wait.
So we're going to be pairing that with Doctor Strangelove next week over on the Patreon. Again, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast for anyone interested in that. And then in 2 weeks' time, we are going to be talking about some American jingoistic 80s military propaganda action films with the boys from the Blowback podcast. We're going to be talking about Red Dawn, directed by John Milius, kind of considered one of like the biggest like anti-communist action films of its era. And we're also going to be pairing it with probably a lesser known one, but one called Red Scorpion, which from what I understand is sort of the Rambo knockoff starring Dolph Lundgren, directed by who's that guy who did the fourth Friday the 13th, the like crazy conservative guy who did that, Joseph Zito, that's his name. We're going to be talking about him basically doing a movie that was funded by the apartheid South African government.
So pretty wild.
Yeah, we're going to get in some pretty dark political right-wing space, and we're going to be talking about that with the Blowback Boys in 2 weeks' time. So look forward to that.
Awesome.
But yeah, that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.